and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast for movie nerds by movie nerds. As always, I'm Mario Lanza, and I am your host on our journey through the movies that just need a little more love. And today's episode, this is a fun one. This is, I would say, maybe one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time, perhaps. If it's not top 10, it's certainly top 20. We are talking about the 1999 movie Election, which is so wonderfully dark and cynical and nasty. It is like putting my sense of humor on a plate. This movie could not be more perfect for me. And I will say, leading off, that sometimes I do movies that are a little more obscure. Sometimes I do ones that are a little better well-known. Admittedly, Election's one of the better-known movies I've done on Staff Picks. But I am just dying to talk about it for a number of reasons, and we'll get into those in a second. So please bear with me if this is a movie that perhaps isn't quite as obscure as some of the other ones, but I do expect this one will get a lot of downloads just because my episodes of the more known movies are the ones that people tend to download. So you got to pay the piper sometimes. I have to do well-known movies to get an audience. But again, I love Election so much. I love the director, Alexander Payne, so much, and I'm dying to talk about it. So here we go. So my guest for this episode, a longtime listener and reader of mine. He's been emailing me for quite a while about movies because he wanted to come on and be a guest. He just wanted to be a part of the show and get to know me and meet me. So I'm very excited to have him on the show. I will say, he's a movie fan, young guy, half my age. It's always fun when I talk to someone half my age. I'm very excited to have him on the show. Welcome to Staff Picks for the first time, Owen Donne.
Thank you very much. Very appreciate you having me on. Very big fan of this movie, big fan of yours, excited to talk about it.
I will say, just before I get to talk to Owen here, that we've been going back and forth for months for what kind of movie we should do on Staff Picks. And I will say, Owen, you had me with 2 words. All you had to say was Alexander Payne.
Yes.
So tell people a little bit about who you are and how you ended up on the show and kind of your back history with this movie.
Sure. So I'm a huge fan of movies. I got really into reviewing them on my Instagram stories, on my private Instagram, like back in high school, and then I got into Letterboxd. So I'm just a huge fan of movies, huge fan of just movie podcasts and discourse and all of that. And I became a huge fan of yours, Mario, because I'm a huge Survivor fan, and I would read your columns with the funny 115, as I'm sure most people listening are familiar, and I would just be a huge fan of the column and read, and links out to podcasts, your Survivor podcast, this podcast, just a big fan of your work. And then from there, we just chat back and forth on Survivor theory and movies now and then, and it just kind of fomented of like, hey, I'd love to be a guest, and it just worked out.
And how did Alexander Payne come up? Now, before you answer that question, let me point out to my listeners, Alexander Payne, one of my very favorite movie directors. I'll watch anything this guy makes, especially his early stuff. It is so nasty and so well written and so cynical. Now, how did you stumble onto Alexander Payne, and how did it come up in our discussion?
I've always just kind of known him as one of those like kind of Coen Brothers era level kind of directors. And I think I just knew it from one of your columns that you were a big fan of Alexander Payne. And it's like you said about paying the piper. If you want to get on the podcast, you should probably know what kind of episodes are in the tank. So maybe it was a lucky guess, but I knew that you liked Election from probably on the website, and I was like, this is a movie that I know.
Okay, for people who don't know, before I did this podcast, I used to have a website called 200 Movies That Deserve More Love, which was very much the predecessor of this podcast. Now, I never finished that website, mostly because I wasn't getting a lot of readership, and it was a lot of work. Writing is so much harder than just talking. So I got like 67 episodes into it, but you can find it on funny115.com, my old website. And I think, if I recall, Election is one of the episodes I wrote about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's how you know.
Yeah, that's political.
It's political, yes. You're playing the game correctly. Well done. Good play.
Thank you.
So let me point this out before we get too far in the podcast, just because this always amuses me. So I'm 49 years old. I saw Election in the theater in 1999. I was 25. Owen, I know this is going to hurt. How old are you?
I'm 22 years old.
22. So you were born after election.
That's right.
Okay. Just throwing that out there before the discussion gets incredibly awkward in a little bit as we start talking about this from different angles. Okay, so Alexander Payne. Let's talk about Alexander Payne for a second. Have you seen? I know you've seen some of his movies. You haven't seen all of them, correct?
I've seen three. I've seen Election, I've seen Sideways, and I've seen Downsizing. And I know a little bit about some of his other. Those are the ones that I've actually seen.
Okay. Now, okay, let's talk about this. I don't know. I was debating if I wanted to do this. I love almost all Alexander Payne movies, but I could not stand Downsizing. Okay, then am I wrong? Am I just wrong, or are you a huge Downsizing defender?
I'm not a huge Downsizing defender, but I think it certainly has its place. Man goes to live in a tiny world is pretty funny. It's about did you ever see Don't Look Up with it's about as good as Don't Look Up. I think it's like, you get it, and about 10 minutes in you understand what it's going for, and then it executes on the premise. I thought it was pretty funny when spoilers for Downsizing, but when his wife left, backed out of the surgery, that was pretty funny. And the movie overall, I enjoyed it, but I don't think it's a rewatchable. I think you get it on the first go through.
Yeah, I actually like the first half of Downsizing, but it changes into a whole different movie in the second half. I think that was I haven't seen it in a while, so I can't really talk specifics.
Yeah, it's a strange sort of romantic, class struggle.
Okay, so luckily this is not a podcast on Downsizing, so let me pivot quickly. So Alexander Payne, for people who don't know, his first movie, you have got to see. Not just talking about you, Owen, but anybody. And I've done this. This is the only Alexander Payne movie I've covered on Staff Pick so far, which is called Citizen Ruth. Have you heard of that one?
I have.
That is one you should, at all haste, go and find quickly and watch. That is such an amazing comedy, and I cannot believe that's a first-time director making that movie.
Citizen Ruth on Paramount Plus. That's right after this.
Excellent. Yeah, for people who don't know, it's an abortion comedy, which it's a very hard line to straddle to make that funny, but somehow he does it. And it's even more cynical and nasty than this one, Election, which was his following movie. So that's how I would sell people on it. Citizen Ruth is this one, but even nastier. Okay, so Alexander Payne came out of the gate with Citizen Ruth, which one of my all-time favorite comedies. He followed it up in 1999 with this one, Election, which, oh my God, was this a fun movie. And then the next one after this is About Schmidt, which might actually be the best of the three movies. So let me plug that one as well. So you already got a little homework, Owen, after this podcast.
Absolutely, yeah, you recommended that one earlier.
And then later he did a fourth movie, Nebraska, which I honestly think might be the best movie of the past 20 years. So there you go. This is my Alexander Payne fanaticism.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's talk. Do you know much of the backstory of this movie, like how it came about, or have you read the novel? You know it's based on a novel, right?
Yeah, so I was reading that, refreshing on that today. So it was similar with Sideways, another one of the Payne greats, based on a novel, but developed before the novel was published. It was based on the developing manuscript, and they based it on it was based on the Ross Perot coming in the 1992 election, which I suppose you were a voter for, and a prom queen election interference case in real life in the 80s, I believe, where a pregnant high school girl was elected the prom queen, but the teachers fixed the vote so she wouldn't win, and it became a whole thing.
Yeah, so this is based on kind of two true stories, and it's a fiction novel. I've never personally read the novel. Have you ever read it?
Oh, no.
Okay. I have a friend named Sarah who I was just talking to today, and I asked if she'd read the novel, and she goes, yeah, I've read it. She goes, it's a lot like the movie, but it's not quite as biting, and it doesn't quite have the style of the movie. Like, the movie's a little bit of a different story than the novel, so I haven't really heard great things about it, so... Anyway, I just wanted to point that out to people. This is not an original movie. It's based on a novel.
Well, as we all know, the movie is always better than the book.
Always, yes, exactly. The Stephen King theory. Yes. So this movie came out in 1999, and I didn't know Alexander Payne. I had no idea what this movie was. I will say, from someone who was there at the time, the big selling point of this movie was, A, it was an MTV movie. MTV Productions had just started. This was one of their first movies. And the other thing that was a big selling point at the time is, I'm sure you'll have something to say about this, they basically took Ferris Bueller, one of the most iconic characters of the 80s, and they made him a teacher and gave him a student that he hated. So that was kind of the selling point at the time. This is the reverse Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah, I've always thought that was such a funny angle that it's just the perfect compliment to that character. Where Ferris Bueller, see, I've always enjoyed it because I've always had that thought of it, because when I just watched this a couple of years ago, so I didn't know of it, and that was a pre-existing thing, which makes a ton of sense. I always interpreted not that this character is the opposite of not the opposite of Ferris Bueller, but this is Ferris Bueller grown up, and that cool kid more or less just turns out to be a kind of a prick. Like, I was rewatching Ferris Bueller today, and his friend asked his girlfriend, like, what do you think he's going to be? And she was like, I think he's going to be working at a hot dog stand or something like that. And I think this isn't the opposite of Ferris Bueller. This is Ferris Bueller at his logical conclusion, where he's just kind of still trying to keep control of his own world in the classroom now that he's amounted to little, which is maybe a little more cynical from the Ferris Bueller perspective. But I think it's a compliment. Maybe an opposite, but maybe just a logical conclusion.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent analysis. And a lot of people in 99 were saying the same thing. This is basically Ferris Bueller grown up, and now he has to deal with other Ferris Buellers. Although, okay, I'm dying to know, since you're only 22. So Ferris Bueller's Day Off came out in, 1985 or 6? I forget what year. How does that hold up for someone your age? Because that is so much older than you. Like, I know that movie inside and out. I remember seeing it in the theater. I remember having discussions about how does it hold up for someone who doesn't see it until many years later?
Well, for me personally, it's great, but just more on the generation, because I like movies from all decades, but across like that's a movie that people still like. Like, there's a rare breed where like it would be probably that and like The Breakfast Club, where people like watch it, without a sense of irony. Like, people love that movie. People think it's really funny. That's one of the movies that has like definitely a lingering legacy because it's timeless. Everyone fakes being sick to stay home. Yeah, like Ferris Bueller is one of the movies from the 80s, or just from past, like, the last century, where it has definitely lasted. And like, people like Ferris Bueller TikToks are up all the time of just like, that's a character even who's almost like the Heath Ledger Joker, or that character, or like Patrick Bateman. I guess you could say it's a variety of characters, but really 3 sociopaths. But those are characters that like definitely live on, like through like their quotes and all that stuff, and like TikTok shorts or like little highlight reels. And people watch the movies. I used to go bowling at a bowling alley that would have like 4 DVDs, and one of them was Ferris Bueller. So I would see that movie like once a week on mute. But that's a movie that hasn't lost any steam in terms of its place in the culture, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, because my daughter is basically the same age as you. She's 23, and I cannot get her to watch anything from the 80s. She just won't. It's like pulling teeth. So I'm very excited to know the Ferris Bueller is one that actually kind of carries over to a younger audience.
Oh yeah, it's like that is in its own tier with like Breakfast Club versus like like a 16 Candles, which, say what you will about it, but like people don't watch in the same way. That's more like if you have if you're going through the genre, or if like it's a movie your mom likes, so she shows you. But like those are two. I think American Pie is also probably like that. Mm-hmm. But like movies that are actually like, no, like they're still the tapes are still circulated.
Okay, yeah, that's good. For just a little trivia for my listeners, if we didn't do Election, the backup movie we were talking about was American Pie. So I'm a huge fan of American Pie. Apparently, I'm a big fan of Chris Klein movies from 1999.
I was just going to say, this is the Chris Klein fan club.
Okay, so we're going to delve into this movie, but before we do, I have to tell you guys, I have one of my all-time favorite movie stories is about Election, and I'm a little embarrassed telling the story, but it's going to be a little blue, little cursey here. So my entire life, Owen, what I've done is I recommend movies to people. Like, I was doing this when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. that I'm the kid who knows every movie, and I'm very good. I take pride in this. I can match a movie with a person. I can say you'd like this movie. So, and I usually have a very strong track record. But I have to say my all-time worst recommendation is when I recommended Election to my mom. Okay, I'm going to spoil this movie a little bit, but you guys will like the story. So back in 2001 or 2, I forget, maybe somewhere in there, this movie had just come out on VHS. And I told my mom, there's this great movie we should all watch together called Election. You guys will like it. And the reason why I said that is because my mom was an overachiever in school. Like, she was one of those Tracy Flicks who was always raising her hand, always had to get an A. She was like the annoying kid, always like that. And I'm like, you'll like this movie, Mom. It's about an overachiever girl who fights with her teacher. And my mom was very, old school Lutheran. I wasn't allowed to watch R-rated movies. Like, we didn't watch anything harder than a PG, no swearing stuff in our movies. And I remembered Election as being a little more tame than it actually was. So this is my all-time maybe worst movie story, that I'm there with my wife at the time and my parents, and we're all watching Election, and we're sitting there and I'm trying to introduce my parents to this movie. I completely forgot there's a whole subplot in this movie about the teacher having an affair with Tracy Flick.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to one line in the movie, and please apologize, but the line is, her pussy gets so wet it's amazing. I'm like, oh, I suddenly remember there's a really dark subplot in this about basically statutory rape with a teacher and student, and my mom was not pleased. And so it's the most awkward the most awkward movie viewing ever, as we're sitting there, and then they have the scene where, Mr. McAllister's taking his wife from behind, and there's a billion, fuck me, do it to me, give me to me harder. And I'm like, you know what, Mom, we could just turn this movie off right now.
Yeah.
So, to this day, a legendary story my wife still remembers, the most awkward time she'd ever been sitting watching a movie with anybody.
Yeah, and that limits who I can share that I was on this podcast with.
Yeah, so I'm just warning you guys, this one's going to get a parental advisory this episode, just because this movie is way dirtier and nastier than you remember it being. If you haven't watched in a while, oh my God.
It's a hard R.
It is. And that was the thing. It was an MTV movie. It was like targeted towards teenagers and stuff. But boy, yeah, this is a hard R. And I don't do many hard R movies on this podcast. So anyway, I'm just saying I'm glad you're over 18 and you can discuss this movie like an adult, because if you're not an adult, you're a child. That's how you'll be treated, just like the students at Carver. Okay, anything else you want to say about Election before we dive into the plot and talk about how amazing this movie is?
I will just say, the first time I watched it, I didn't get it, and I was like, this movie wasn't funny, and it was really mean. But then the 9 consecutive times I've watched it since, I get it.
Yeah, I will say, because that actually ties into something I have in my notes here. The first time I saw this movie, I kind of didn't get what its perspective was, because I thought you were supposed to be rooting for Tracy Flick.
Well, I thought you were supposed to be rooting for Mr. McAllister. I was like, this guy sucks.
Yeah, that's kind of the wonderful thing about this movie, when I keep saying how cynical and dark it is. There's no good guy in this movie, really. They're all nasty, and you have to kind of accept that. This is not a traditional narrative.
Yeah, this is like Game of Thrones again.
Game of Thrones. So you're comparing Election to Game of Thrones.
I think Tracy Flick is a perfect Cersei.
Okay, we'll take your word for it. That's a whole different podcast. We'll talk about that on the next one. Okay, so yeah, Election, 1999. I've talked about this before. 1999 was the greatest year for movies ever. It was like just one memorable, iconic movie after another all year. Probably capped off by the Blair Witch Project and The Matrix being the big ones, but it was really just all year. And Election was one of like 50. Have you looked into that? Have you heard about this 1999 theory before?
I have a contingent theory on that, where I think 2019 and 1989 are also great movies, and I think it's this everyone wants to get in for the decade and be like the last word on it, because all these decades end up being so iconic that you want to be like the last word on the 80s, and that's why you have these clogs of movies that are trying to get into be the end of one decade as opposed to being the start of another.
That's actually a really interesting theory. So already I'm excited that you're on the podcast. You actually have something to say. That's good.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just throwing this out there. A lot of people also argue 1984 was a big year for movies, but like I will grant all those were good years for movies, but 99 will always be my year. Election was one of the great movies of 99.
Hey, I want to stop you real quick. I can give you my top 10 of 1999 if that interests you from the born 2 years afterwards perspective.
Yes, I want to hear the 22-year-old perspective. So, okay, this is someone who was not born in 99, who came after. Looking back at 99, I want to see how your notes compare to mine. What are your top 10 movies from 99?
All right, here's my top 10 for 1999. Austin Powers 1, Office Space, But I'm a Cheerleader, Election, Eyes Wide Shut, The Iron Giant, 10 Things I Hate About You, Fight Club, South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, and American Pie. And that's old, but I'll still stand by that. I probably put Eyes Wide Shut a little higher, and Election, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, those are all good choices, and I could think of 10 almost off the top of my head. You didn't even mention like Being John Malkovich and The Matrix and The Blair Witch Project. Like,
you know what's funny? Those are 11, 12, and 14.
Yeah. So anyway, when people talk about 99, you guys, we're not kidding. That movie was that year was so unbelievable. And it's just a matter of time until we get to American Pie and The Matrix and some of these other ones.
Yeah, and then American Pie 2, believe me.
Wait, that wasn't the same year, was it?
Oh no, but I just meant that after American Pie 2 is a movie that deserves more love.
So wait a minute, you think you're going to get a sequel on Staff Picks? Now you're talking crazy here.
No. Just for your consideration, it's a great vacation movie.
It's Petey approved, isn't Petey the trombone player?
Yeah.
I cannot believe I remember that. I haven't seen that movie in 20 years.
Petey's a great member of the gang.
Okay, let's go to Election. Okay, so again, this is an Alexander Payne movie. He had a partner, Jim Taylor. If you find any screenplay by Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor, they're all the exact same style. Like Election, they're About Schmidt and Citizen Ruth are the exact same style of this movie. That's why I always try to get it across to people. If you like one, you would love the other two. They're all set in the same universe. In fact, this movie has a lot of inside jokes with Citizen Ruth they kind of share. I'll point those out as we get to that. The other thing I wanted to point out, Owen, have you listened to the director's commentary for this movie?
I haven't.
Okay, I know this is going to be a problem with a 22-year-old because you guys don't watch DVDs.
I do, but I actually have the Election DVD.
Okay, I will tell you, the DVD commentary is one of the best I have ever heard for any movie ever. Alexander Payne just sits there and gives you a master class on symbolism and setting up a story and setting up a screenplay and payoffs and callbacks and stuff. He just goes through the entire movie and just lays out all the little symbolism he threw in there, and it's really interesting to listen to. It adds so much to this movie.
I'll definitely listen to that.
Yeah, it'll add a lot, and I'll bring it up some of the stuff he mentions as we go through. Okay, so this movie is set in Nebraska, as most Alexander Payne movies are. He is a Midwesterner, and he loves making fun of the Midwest, loves making fun of small towns. Again, this is like Drop Dead Gorgeous, just straight up cynical movie where just everybody's a piece of shit, and they all treat each other like shit. Okay, so let's start with our hero, quote-unquote hero, Jim McAllister. So I'll leave it to you, Owen. Kind of explain who Jim McAllister is in our story.
Jim McAllister, he introduces himself as the everyone's favorite teacher, and unfortunately the teacher who tries to be everyone's favorite teacher or just congratulates himself on that. The guy who acts in the skits at the pep rally and just the compassionate, everyone's favorite teacher guy. And his one problem is that he just hates this one student, Tracy Flick. And he is also the biggest narrator and the biggest hypocrite in the movie because he's constantly saying things like, so things are going great as you see things going awful. And he is just a total, whether he's living in denial or just oblivious, you are always seeing this guy be completely foiled and like absolutely hypocritical and just saying he believes one thing in the narration and then acting a completely different way. It is a very, very good effect.
Yeah, that is kind of an Alexander Payne trademark if you guys don't know his movies. His narrator or hero is always a piece of shit, which I just love about it, but they don't realize they're a piece of shit. And Jim McAllister may be the worst of all the narrators in any Alexander Payne movie, I have to say, which is impressive when in Citizen Ruth, it's a homeless paint huffing prostitute. But Jim McAllister might be worse than her. So anyway, yeah, he teaches at a school in Nebraska called George Washington Carver High School. He has been there for 12 years. This is Matthew Broderick, and he is the teacher of the year. He teaches civics, teaches I forget what else, but American government and stuff like that. And yeah, he is the teacher who everyone says is the best in the school. He cares about the kids. He's a super nice guy. And again, we're going to find out maybe not so much. He's not the nicest guy in the world. In fact, there's a very pivotal scene in this movie that happens right at the start where Mr. McAllister shows up at school and he narrates, and we hear a lot of this movie in voiceover about how amazing he is. And, I've tried so hard. I've done so much. And the very first scene is him cleaning out the refrigerator at school, and he just throws a canister of Chinese food on the floor, and the janitor sees him and gets all pissed off. So right off the bat, this is an Alexander Payne trademark. This guy saying he's amazing and he does something that's not amazing.
Yeah, I love the opener with him on the. It just has this thwacking sound of the sprinkler going off, and you have just him in the background running on the track, just in endless loops, and the little the way the sprinkler is framed, you just have the endless stream of water, which is the plastic just coming up, just insignificantly affecting the spray, and I feel like that is supposed to be the McAllister flick kind of conflict in microcosm. It's just this movie is almost like an unstoppable force versus a very movable object, and just how he just gets steamrolled by her.
That is fantastic. That is a fantastic piece of analysis, and that exactly ties into what Alexander Payne talks about on the commentary. That there's so many little symbols and symbolism and running jokes in this movie. Another one is that if you watch Election again, you'll notice at the start of the movie, Matthew Broderick is going through this little maze of the fence to try to get into the track so he can run around. Alexander Payne says several points in this movie he shows a character moving in kind of a circle, like a track, or getting through a little maze in a fence. And he says because that's kind of the point and the message of this movie, every character just travels in the same circle and doesn't actually go anywhere. So they all just it's like an endless Sisyphean trap they're in their life. They're never going to change. They're just exactly the same. So he says watch for that as the movie goes along. You'll see people walking in circles a lot.
Yeah. I want to read the Tracy Flick quote that I think it's the first time she speaks in the movie, and it's so funny because she has these quotes, she's a total machine in this movie. She has these quotes that are so dark. I compared it to Thanos in ours, but she just comes out of here with these random, brutal things. She says, my mom taught me that the weak are always trying to sabotage the strong.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many Okay, so to paint a picture, I assume most of you have seen Election. If you have not, oh my God, go see Election. Tracy Flick is the most accomplished student in the school, played by Reese Witherspoon. She's a straight A student. She is a insufferable kiss ass. And again, that's why when I first saw this movie, I thought you're supposed to like her, but you're not, are you, huh?
I love her.
You love her? Oh no. So am I way off in my analysis of this movie?
No, you're way on, but I just think she's a total I think she's a total Rorschach. I think this is one of those movies where the people you root for are different every time. Rewatching for this, the McAllister guy is just a complete zero in terms of likability. Every time you watch this movie, he has a new negative personality trait. The thing about Tracy is that she is often insufferable, but I think she's admirable. I think that's the kind of almost the it's like the Skylar White effect in Breaking Bad, which I'm sure you've seen or at least familiar with.
I know.
Where when you're no,
I know of it. Yeah.
Sure. Where when you're watching the dynamic of drug dealer husband and the wife who's opposed to it, when you're watching it, you're like, come on, Skylar, let him cook, frankly. But when you go on the rewatch, you're like, she has a really great point throughout the entire show. As you're watching it from McAllister's perspective, you're thinking, oh, Tracy, she's insufferable. When you watch it from Tracy's perspective, she's certainly a little annoying, but she's also 17. And she's her biggest crime is trying to be elected president. And, being a little bit obnoxious throughout. But no, she's definitely insufferable. But, she's just the best. Maybe it's a little bit like loving the villain or Darth Vader is the best Star Wars character. but I think she's just totally lights out in this.
You know what's really interesting is that I have noticed this before. You're actually tying into something I've noticed before, that who you talk to about this movie or about Tracy Flick, their opinion of Tracy Flick will depend on who they are and how old they are. It's very interesting that I've noticed this over the years. A lot of young people kind of, relate to Tracy Flick. They understand Tracy Flick. They understand what she's trying to do. But I also know a lot of older people, in particular a lot of people who are teachers, and they fucking hate her. Because they're like, I have kids like that. I hate those kids. Like, I know a couple teachers. I will not name names, but I am married to one, and I have heard similar comments about not liking students like Tracy Flick. So it's very interesting with life experience that people can have wildly different opinions of Tracy Flick.
Yeah, I would say she is the best because she is the worst.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. If we go with villains, I love a good villain. But that's the thing. People will make an argument that Tracy's really not a villain. She's just doing her best. She's just a normal kid.
Oh, I'm with that. I would probably make that argument because I think she's motivated by self-interest, but I think that's much more admirable than like Mr. McAllister, who is never motivated by self-interest. He's always motivated by like what can hurt other people almost. Like his motivation is like anti-Tracy, where Tracy's motivation is pro-Tracy, and you can't blame someone for playing for the home team.
Yeah, I agree with you. If we're talking a sliding scale, Mr. McAllister will be way worse than Tracy. It's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
But I will go back to another thing that Alexander Payne talks about in his commentary, which I happen to agree with. That this will kind of rebut what you just said. But Alexander Payne said, aside from the people walking around in circles, another theme that is in this movie a lot is garbage. He said, watch this movie. Watch how often I use garbage cans or garbage trucks or someone using a garbage can, hiding behind a garbage can. And because that's really his interpretation of this movie, that everyone is garbage in this movie.
I get behind that, yeah. That's why I like Tracy, because she's surrounded by garbage. So the best garbage might as well rise to the top. Within the context of this movie, I would be on. If I was a character in this movie, I would align myself with Tracy.
No, wait a minute. There's not a single kid in this school who likes Tracy. How, if you were in the movie, how would you possibly align with her? She would crush you. What are you, Larry Fouch?
I'm not sure. I would be her. I would be her Bill Clinton. I would be the face. I would deal with McAllister.
Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, we're getting a little sidetracked here, but yeah, this will be a fun discussion because this really is a struggle, a power struggle, which is one of these things that Alexander Payne does so well. This is a meaningless power struggle. It's a frickin' high school election, but it's made up to be like the biggest thing ever. And that's what I just love about his movies. He always does little things like that. He just loves taking digs at the Midwest. That's kind of his shtick.
Yeah, it's so like dramatic. Like I love how they always call it the election, like because of that damn election. Like it's this pivotal historical moment.
There's a one line. I could name 20 lines in this movie that make me laugh just because of the way they come out. But Mr. McAllister at the end saying, "Hey, come on, it's not like we're electing the fucking Pope." That's the line that I was like.
Yeah, this is a perfect rewatchable because like this is such an easy DVD to just throw on because no matter you can just tune in and out of it, no matter what part you start paying attention on, there's immediately going to be some good dialogue. This is like one of the best written movies ever.
Yeah, I will say I would agree with that. I have so many notes for this movie. I normally have the way that I write. I normally have between 10 to 16 pages of notes, which is normal for me. I just write big, so it's spread all over. But this one I have like 24 pages of notes, and it's because a lot of scenes I just quoted directly. I have to write it down because the dialogue's so sharp. Okay, we're going to get into the plot here, but I do want to say one more thing. Again, it's really just a power struggle between two people with a bunch of pawns trapped in the middle. But I got to say the style of this movie, because you mentioned earlier just the way you can jump in and out of this movie. It's very rewatchable. You pick up little stuff. There's symbolism. I'm going to use a Roger Ebert quote. You know who Roger Ebert is, right?
Love him.
Okay, good. He had a law called Ebert's Law that I haven't quoted enough on Staff Picks. I should bring this up more, where he said very famously, a movie is not about what it is about. It is about how it is about it. And I always think of that when I watch Election, because this is such a simple movie, but so much of it is in the style and the flashbacks and the storytelling and the narration. So that's exactly what Roger Ebert would say. A movie is about how it is about it.
Yeah, I love they have like a bunch of. I love it how they have a bunch of tricks that they use once. Like they have the when Tammy and her girlfriend have the flashback, they bring out these black like borders and have like little squares of footage like intersecting as like this like montage, almost like a I guess it's predates it, but almost like an iMovie video you would make about like a relationship.
Mhm.
Or all these like little like when Tammy is stalking Paul and Lisa, he like has like an office zoom to her behind the trash can.
Mhm.
Like there's a bunch of like one-time camera tricks that are just like really effective and really funny. Like this is almost like a kitchen sink kind of style that I really appreciate.
Yeah, it's really funny because on you mentioned an earlier podcast. I don't really like talking about other podcasts, but there is a Bill Simmons movie podcast, The Rewatchables, right? You talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do a thing on The Rewatchables at the end where they say who won the movie, like who was the winner. And almost everybody would say Reese Witherspoon or Matthew Broderick. But like when I watch this movie, this is such an Alexander Payne showcase. I cannot think anybody wins this movie but him.
Yeah, him or Chris Klein.
Yeah, he's unbelievable in this, which is an odd sentence to say.
Chris Klein is might be the most believable a character is in anyone. Because like Tracy Flick is great, and maybe it's just because Reese Witherspoon has one of those faces where it is only ever her. But like Tracy Flick is like a great performance, whereas Paul is almost as though like he's in a documentary, and all of this is just being put up around him as like a prank.
Okay, unfortunately we're not up to Paul yet, so people might not if you haven't seen the movie. But yeah, we'll hold that thought because I want to get back to that. Okay, so it's the first day of school and like or whatever in the movie, and Mr. McAllister arrives and he's Mr. Nice Guy, Teacher of the Year. And the very first scene in the movie is him walking and he sees Tracy Flick, who again is the overachieving student he can't stand, and she's getting ready for the big school election. And I'll just summarize this for people. This is every year they have the student council government, and this is her senior year, so she's all excited. It's like her coronation to class president. So she's out there early on the day they can start gathering signatures for their petition to run. And Mr. McAllister sees her, and he just, again, there's no way around it. He just fucking hates her. Okay, here we go. I'll start with this quote from Tracy Flick. Where a lot of this is told in flashback and narration, and for her point of view, she says, "None of this would have happened if Mr. McAllister wouldn't have meddled the way that he did. He should have just accepted things the way that they are, instead of trying to interfere with destiny. You see, you can't interfere with destiny. That's why it's destiny. And if you try to interfere, the same thing's going to happen anyway, and you'll just suffer." There you go. That's her Thanos quote.
Yes, very big. Very big statements to start off this high school comedy.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people would describe this as a teen movie, but it's really not. This is really not a high school teen movie at all.
This is an anti-teen movie.
Yes. It's not another teen movie before not another teen movie.
Yes.
By the way, we're going to get really inappropriate really quick, so get ready for this one. This movie's going to take a nice dark turn in about 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Before we get to the darkness on Tracy, I just need to say, just state it for the record, that the incredible part of this movie, we don't have to get into the weeds of it, but the incredible part of this movie is the character of Hillary Clinton, who actually exists, and she was non-elected. She might have been running when the movie came out by a very small overlap, but was not a politician. She was just a political figure through being married to the president, of course. But it's incredible that the plot of this movie happened to Hillary Clinton essentially twice.
Yeah, we will get into that. I was going to save that for the end, but it is amazing how well this movie was able to predict the future of politics.
Absolutely. It borders on a 1-to-1.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So the movie starts with Mr. McAllister, this is Matthew Broderick again, in class, and he's teaching his class about the difference between morals and ethics, which is a wonderful running joke in this movie because this will come up constantly. What are morals and what are ethics? And I don't know if you ever caught one of my favorite running jokes in this movie. They never actually answer the question of what the difference is.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So he's teaching his class about morals and ethics, and he's asking, "Did anybody know what the difference is?" And there's the one kid in class who always raises his hand. This is the Tracy Flick. Ooh, got her hand up, and he just won't call on her because he doesn't like her. And
yeah, he does the ungenerous freeze frame.
Yeah, Alexander Payne does a freeze frame on Reese Witherspoon as she's talking, which is wonderful. I know I read that somewhere that Reese Witherspoon didn't like that. She didn't like that directorial choice. So tell us about Tracy. What is kind of her backstory, like with her mom and stuff?
So Tracy is an only child. She/the screenplay goes out of the way to say that she has no father growing up, but that does not give her any daddy issues, per se. Tracy's just this every page of the yearbook and writing every page of the yearbook overachiever. Just is constantly raising her hand in class, and her mother is writing letters to Elizabeth Dole and Connie Chung, asking how she can be a successful woman. And she's just a total, she's like she's like the Manhattan Project. She's just spent her whole life in development to like blow up the world.
So you've compared her to Breaking Bad and now the Manhattan Project.
She's a big deal.
She is. So yeah, Tracy Flick is poised to take over the school. This is her senior year. This guy has spent 3 years dealing with her bullshit. And now she's running for student class president. And again, he can't stand her. Something about her just always rubs him the wrong way. She's such an overachiever. She like has no friends. She just crushes people in her wake. And the thing with this movie is she's running unopposed for student class president. And he has a problem with this because it defeats the whole purpose of democracy.
And that's unethical.
No, that's not moral. So you've got them backwards.
What's the difference?
I don't know. Anyway, so Mr. McAllister, we start with talk a whole speech about how he's a great guy, he's the great teacher, he just doesn't like Tracy. It's, I'm protecting democracy. That's the only reason this election thing happened. I'm just trying to protect democracy. And now we come to the turn in this movie. This is the part that my mom hated. This is a good 9 minutes into the movie. It's right at the start. And I'll be nice to you, Owen. I won't make you quote this one, okay?
Yeah, let's quote this section minimally.
Yeah. Okay. Since I'm going to earn a parental advisory on this podcast, I will advise you right now, put the kids to bed. You don't want them to listen to this part. But so Mr. McAllister says, I don't like Tracy. She's an overachiever. And then he goes, by the way, there's something else I kind of have a problem with her about. And we immediately do. And this is an Alexander Payne trademark. His transitions. He loves to get a cheap shock laugh in the transition from one scene to another. And this is probably the best example I've ever seen, where we immediately cut to another teacher, Mr. Novotny, saying, and I quote, her pussy gets so wet you can't believe it. Thoughts?
None.
You just created a classic Staff Picks moment. That's going to edit well. Yes. So apparently, another teacher who was Mr. McAllister's friend, Mr. Novotny, had, I will use this term loosely, had an affair with Tracy the year before where they were soulmates and they were banging each other. So, like I said, this movie takes a little dark turn that I kind of forgot was in here when I showed it to my mom.
Yeah, this was the part that confused me on the first viewing because I was like, is this, because it's strangely, and I guess it, and I'm certain that's part of the joke on some level, but it's strangely unmentioned for the rest of the movie, and I was like, what was that part at the beginning of?
Well, it does come back at the end. At the very end of the movie, Tracy's wondering what Mr. Novotny, what Dave is doing now, and I miss our talks. I can't believe we aren't still together. So it does come back later. Like, to her, that's the one true love of her life. Also, I should point out, before I get too many people to turn off this podcast, I looked it up. The age of consent in Nebraska is indeed 16. So technically, there's not a crime in this entire movie. I should point that out.
That's good.
Thoughts?
None.
Also, I should point out, is a good way to get in trouble at work is to go on your work computer and Google, what is the age of consent in Nebraska?
Yeah.
I've made my guest uncomfortable. I'm sorry.
I was like, what a hell of a movie to pick.
Hey, you picked Election. It was this or American Pie.
Which is arguably worse. Every movie, yeah, every movie in 1999 is great, but has one strange segment. It's these two. It's American Beauty, American Psycho, just movies with American and strange Freudian narratives.
See, I was going to say this movie doesn't have a strange narrative at all if you look at it from my point of view. Like, this is just what Alexander Payne movies are.
Yeah, this is what 1999 in Nebraska is like.
Yeah, Citizen Ruth is nastier than this one, I'm telling you. Like, it's about a homeless prostitute. So this is what Alexander Payne does. He takes this gentle little Midwest small town school and he immediately goes into the darkness as quickly as he can.
Yeah, this is like Euphoria, 20 years earlier.
Yes, exactly. So there's a subplot in this movie. Again, I'd forgotten. My mom would have appreciated not watching this subplot. But yeah, so Tracy, as Mr. McAllister says, she got herself in a bit of trouble with another teacher. And we get this whole scene. Again, I hate to laugh. That's just Alexander Payne movies are so cynical and dark. He plays this for laughs that we see Mr. Novotny, who was the yearbook teacher the year before, grooming Tracy, telling her how mature she is, how she has to suffer for her greatness, and how she needs a friend and should hang out at his house more.
He says, I think you're one of the most intelligent, thoughtful, and most attractive students, no, human beings I've ever had. And then they have it. I have it on mute in the background now as I'm talking to you, and it's this part now. And I noticed it last time I watched where they zoom in on them making out in the red room, and it goes. It's what the Looking Glass Studio, which is just like such on the nose. It's like A Nightmare on Elm Street names its protagonist Alice. There's a lot of text on screen in this movie that means exactly what it sounds like it means.
Yeah, Alexander Payne is not subtle with his symbolism. There's a couple moments I'll point out later. So, yeah, so there's, I'll say an affair, because that's the way the movie treats it, that Tracy and Mr. Novotny, the yearbook staff teacher, had a passionate love affair, and the problem is that Tracy was in love with this guy was in love with her back, and the guy, Mr. Novotny, confided in his friend, Mr. McAllister, Matthew Broderick. So, anyway, let's talk about the wonderfully awkward scene where he gets fired.
Oh, I think it's the funniest thing. Like, I think it's Broderick says like, I don't need to tell you how that turned out, and it just has the slow thing through the love note, run away with me, blah blah blah, love in quotes your teacher, and then it says P.S. I really really need you now. And he pulls down the note and you see this guy's face just like barely breaking down tears, and then the principal goes on one of the all-time heaters. I've got a legal responsibility. Did you cross the line with this girl? And he just breaks down in tears and says, we're in love.
There's no way anybody should be laughing at that scene, but it kills me. That love note.
Oh, it's like the worst. This is like it's like the To Catch a Predator prototype. The ultimate confrontation. It is so black comedy.
Yeah, darkness upon darkness that the yearbook teacher gets caught because he gets a little too mushy and sends Tracy a love note. That basically, it's an invitation because he wants to go to Maui with her. And then the Dave, the teacher, says, Tracy's mom, she really doesn't understand. Well, no shit she doesn't. Her daughter's 17.
Yeah, and you talked about the transitions. That scene ends with one of the all-time transition lines. I think it might be the funniest line in the movie with what his wife says when it cuts back.
Oh, that's right. She like, are you effing kidding me? That's right. Yeah.
You're effing novel. Are you effing kidding me? And it's like you know the entire conversation before that she says it. Like it is the funniest thing.
I should also point out right before this scene, there's a scene where Mr. Novotny, the yearbook staff guy having an affair with Tracy, is talking to Mr. McAllister, and Matthew Broderick says, what you're doing here is really, really wrong on a moral level. I'm not talking ethics, I'm talking morals. And Mr. Novotny's like, what's the difference? God, I love this screenplay. I wish I could write a screenplay as funny as this one.
You know, the one person in this entire movie who knows the difference between morals and ethics is Tracy Flick, and we never hear her out.
That's right. If only he would listen, she could have explained it to him.
You're surprised he didn't come up during their talks.
Well, she was talking with Novotny. She didn't really have a chance to talk to Mr. McAllister.
Yeah.
So anyway, this yearbook teacher has been fired for banging one of his students, Tracy, and his buddy, Matthew Broderick here, is not happy. So he has a secondary grudge against Tracy. So again, and this will come up again later several times, where it's actually implied throughout the movie that Tracy kind of instigated that a little bit, it's an odd way to tell that story.
Yeah, I think that if you're talking about the rewatchables, that might be under what's age the worst.
Okay, so here we go. And then now we get a little bit from Tracy saying, looking back, I feel bad for Mr. McAllister. Every year he just teaches the same boring job, teaches the same boring lessons to the same boring kids, wears the same dumb clothes. She's like, the students move on. He never does. So looking back, she kind of feels that he's a little pathetic, which is good because he will become pathetic later in the movie quite a bit.
I love in that montage that he really draws like 9 different triangles, and like sometimes it's different which is on which corner of the triangle, but that is literally all the variety in his life is which order of which organization of the triangle he puts the 3 parts of the government on.
Yeah, so she's right, and this is something that Alexander Payne said in his commentary, that the whole point of this movie is everyone just travels in circles, does the same thing over and over. Yeah, okay, so this is the dynamic between Mr. M and Tracy. It's not a particularly happy one. And I think the next scene in the movie is Tracy gathering her signatures for student government. If you want to run for president, you have to get 100 signatures. Naturally, did you catch? Tracy doesn't get 100. She gets 158. She overachieves. So she gets her 158 signatures, and Mr. McAllister's like, well, that's real super, Tracy. My wife was watching this the other day just laughing. She's like, you can just see he's so over her. He doesn't give a shit about anything Tracy does. She's like, well, I'm going to run for president. And he's like, well, you're running unopposed. And is this where she gives the Coca-Cola quote here?
Yeah, she says, he's like, shouldn't be much of a contest. You're running unopposed. He says, well, Coca-Cola is the world's #1 soft drink, but they spend more than the next 10 competitors on advertising. He says, okay.
he just doesn't care. Whatever she says, he doesn't care. What I love.
Yeah, it's just he just no sells her for as long as possible, and then he just starts like it's like a no sell to her face, and then just private hatred. Like that's the thing, is he never ever. I don't think Mr. McAllister is straight up with one other character or himself in the entire movie. He is the ultimate, like, there's a word for it. It's feckless.
I think that's a wonderful word to describe Mr. McAllister. There's not a sincere bone in his body.
Very Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, very Ferris Bueller. That's the thing. He's Ferris Bueller grown up with a little more cynicism. So he takes Tracy's petition with all her signatures, throws it in the trash. Again, more trash imagery in the movie. Although I got to say, this scene right here where she's handing her petition to him in his car, I don't know if you noticed, but she's like stroking the windowsill like seductively.
Yeah, she does the little tiptoe fingers.
Yeah, and she's like, when I'm president, we're going to spend a lot of close time together alone. And I hope it's harmonious and productive. And if you listen really close, Alexander Payne plays the same music cue he played when they were reading the love note from Mr. Novotny, the little Hawaii music.
Yeah, it's almost this like Family Guy kind of philosophy of just like take down everyone, because you wouldn't think that they would, any other comedy would not like make fun of her role in all of this, but the way he's implying it is like she's like this high schooler trying to sleep her way to the top, which is just a completely absurd premise, but like that's the joke.
Yeah, see, that to me that's just Alexander Payne. He just wants everybody to be unlikable, so he's gonna make a little more. He's going to add a little more shade of gray to Tracy's role in this whole thing, just because that's what he does in his movies.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not supposed to like anybody. That's kind of the rule. Although I think the other message here is that Mr. McAllister kind of has some sexual feelings for her himself. I think that's, if you look at his eyes, the way he reacts to her in that scene, he may have a little bit of lust for his students as well, which again would be perfectly in character for someone as feckless and terrible as him.
Yeah, I think you definitely see that with the video.
Oh, yeah. All right, with the video, let's get up to that. So we go back to his house, and we hear Mr. M, and we hear his story about he's got a wife, Diane, and my best friend, my source of love and strength. He's like, thank God. Again,
such crap.
Yeah, such crap. It's such an Alexander Payne. He's talking about what a wonderful marriage they have and how she's special. Meanwhile, he's going to be cheating on her routinely throughout this movie. But yeah, he's like, after 9 years of marriage, we were closer than ever. And this is the jerk off scene. I hate to say that so bluntly, but yeah. So,
I actually don't think he jerks off. I think he just watches and sips Pepsi.
Really? So you think he's watching it for the plot?
I see it right now. He's got a hand on the can and a hand on his head. I think he's just. It's at least implied, overstated. With this movie, it's you never know which is going to be.
All right, these are the kind of discussions they don't have in the rewatchables. Is Mr. M going to jack off here?
I think you'd be surprised what kind of. You need to listen to more episodes of the rewatchables.
Okay, so thank you for plugging a different podcast on my show. Yes. Go listen to that one, not this one.
You can cut that.
Yeah, so we get this wonderful scene of Mr. McAllister talking about how much he loves his wife, how close they are, and it immediately cuts to him sneaking out of bed so he can go jerk off downstairs. Such a wonderful transition. So he goes downstairs, he's got a whole stash of porn, and what I love about this scene is this is right after the scene where Tracy talks about how she's like Coca-Cola, how she loves advertising for Coke. And if you watch, he's drinking a can of Pepsi. It just shows how much he doesn't like Tracy.
Yeah, he has like oppositional defiant disorder towards her.
Yeah. So he goes downstairs and he's watching a porn movie called Touchdown. And I love the details in this porn movie they're supposed to be college students on like a cheerleader and a college football player, but the actor's like 50.
And that guy is like 70 years old.
Yeah, the teenager, the cheerleader looks like she's about 19. Yeah, and she's like, I have a special play I'd like you to show me. You can be the quarterback. I'll be your tight end. And it's just him just doggy styling her. So it's just watching Matthew Broderick watch porn. It's a wonderful moment in cinema.
It's crass, yes. I don't think that was not in Godzilla.
No. Godzilla a little more family friendly.
Was Godzilla in 1998?
It was a little before this, because this movie was kind of considered a comeback for Matthew Broderick.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, he was a child of the 80s who did Broadway and then kind of came back in the late 90s and started, like this was one of the, for sure that, oh look, he's back, now he's a grown-up, it's cool.
Yeah, I read that he was the youngest ever Tony winner today, which was shocking, or something close enough to that.
Yeah, he's a big deal. I mean, I could have a whole podcast on what a big deal he was in the 80s. Arguably, in my mind, he's the biggest star in the 80s, bigger than the Brat Pack.
Interesting.
So he's watching this movie, and he's watching a quarterback pound a cheerleader. And as he's watching, he suddenly gets a moment of inspiration, which I always love. I always kind of forget if I haven't watched this movie in a while, that the whole plot comes from a porn movie. Now, what is his plot, Owen?
Well, he is going to recruit an outside candidate, Paul Metzler, the leg-broken quarterback, to run for president on his off year and take down Tracy Flick. Essentially, he plays Putin to Paul Metzler as Donald Trump.
Yes. I love your analogies. This is like my most analogy-heavy episode, and we're only like half an hour in. Yeah, so Paul Metzler, played by Chris Klein, and we'll talk about him in a second, is the most popular student in school. He is the starting quarterback on the football team. Big, dumb sheepdog. That's the only way I could really describe him. A big, happy-go-lucky sheepdog. Kind of an idiot, but very popular, and he has a broken leg at the moment. He broke it skiing. We see a flashback of him breaking his leg. And Mr. McAllister's like, he could beat Tracy in the election. So because of this porn movie with the quarterback, he realizes, I found somebody who can knock Tracy off her little perch.
That guy, McAllister, is such a perv in this whole movie. Everything he does is just like this, just creepy layer, and he always acts like so normal. But it's like this movie is the ultimate. Like you're watching it, and you just think, well, all right, scene to scene, you're like, all right, this tracks. I logically understand this, but like sometimes you just take a step back and watch, and you're like, what the hell is wrong with this guy?
In McAllister, he really has no goals in life at all other than to crush an 18-year-old girl.
Yeah, there's no the thing about it, McAllister, honestly, thinking about it, like there's not even anything that drags him into the conflict. Like in this script, there's no inciting incident for McAllister. He just gets the urge to mess with things. There's no reason, there's nothing in his life that pushes him to ruin it. It's just his own boredom.
It's do you know Karate Kid, the Karate Kid series? It's like Karate Kid 3.
I don't know 3, but I'm familiar with the saga.
Karate Kid 3 has a billionaire named Terry Silver who has nothing better to do but destroy the life of a teenage karate champion. It's very similar to Election in a lot of ways. Okay, so let's talk about Chris Klein here. I will start this by saying Chris Klein was not an actor. This is kind of interesting. He was just a student. They were out scouting this movie. Alexander Payne was on location in Nebraska looking for some extras to put in his movie, and he walked into this high school where they were scouting, and the principal said, hey, there's this kid on the football team, kind of wants to get into drama, you should meet him. And so Alexander Payne met him, and this is Chris Klein. And because of this movie, Chris Klein kind of was thrust into stardom, and he did this, did an American Pie, did Rollerball. He did a lot of stuff, but he was not a trained actor, so it's kind of an interesting story how he became famous.
Yeah, he's almost, I mean, you'd imagine he must be almost playing himself.
Yeah, that's the thing. I have to imagine there's a lot of Paul Metzler in Chris Klein. That's why I think the principal wanted to introduce him to the director. But I love him so much in this movie. He's so likable. He's actually the one character I think who's not garbage in this movie. He's actually he's kind-hearted but stupid. Yeah.
It's funny. I think it's an interesting contrast, kind of compliment with his character in American Pie, who's like this like well-meaning but very he's like the smartest idiot almost, or like the nicest idiot, but he's also kind of this bozo, but he like learns to be nice learns to be nice. It's pretty simple. Whereas in this movie he's almost like always nice. I don't even think he learns anything. His arc is like of just being unchanged. Like he's the control point. Like he's the perfect good in this movie that everyone else seems like a jerk compared to.
Yeah, that's the thing. His arc does not change. You're totally correct about that. All these other people are fighting and jockeying for position around Paul Metzler. His arc does not change. He ends the movie exactly where he started, and he's perfectly happy.
Better. He's like the 1 year later flash forward is just, my life has continued to be awesome. It confirms Tracy's whole thing, which is that he doesn't have to try or put in any effort into just having a great life. He can just coast to popularity.
Yeah, and that's kind of the underlying message of this movie, that elections are just popularity contests. Nobody cares about ideas. They just care about who they like the most. Yeah, Chris Klein, I just love in this movie. I think he adds so much energy to it. I cannot believe this is his first movie. He's so endearing. Although this probably will not surprise you. When Chris Klein first came out, he played like the sweethearted, stupid jock 2 movies in a row. And he kind of had that airhead look on his face. He just kind of looks blank when he's talking. Can you guess which Hollywood star he was compared to instantly the minute he appeared in Hollywood?
Like a Christian Slater?
Keanu Reeves.
Oh, that's good.
I remember this from 1999. All of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, there's this 20-year-old Keanu Reeves clone. Because like he's very much like young Bill and like Ted Theodore Logan. He's kind of got that dopey sheepdog look.
The Keanu Reeves movie I always think of this reminds me of his River's Edge, mm-hmm. which sounds like you're familiar with, but just like a dark, like high school kind of gritty, grim kind of true crime, almost like Zodiac. It's a murder movie. But I could see Chris Klein in the River's Edge part, just maybe a little bit less scowling.
Yeah, and Chris Klein is one of those guys who had a career for a while, and it kind of fizzled out. And I remember reading he was an alcoholic. He had some alcohol problems, but he really did pretty well for himself coming into Hollywood with no background whatsoever. So I tip my cap, and I really do love him in this movie. I think he's the one somewhat sweet character you kind of enjoy.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to her in a second, but I wouldn't even say she's somewhat sweet, but I think Tammy is probably my favorite character on a rewatch, because I just think she could have her own movie. She's a complete gem in this.
I have heard a lot of modern day reviews say the same thing, that Tammy's really the standout in this movie. Like, a lot of people at the time didn't mention that, but I've heard that, and I can see that criticism, that she really pops off screen even though she's not in it that much.
Mm-hmm. Tammy, who I read today that Jessica Campbell has passed a couple of years back, so rest in peace to her.
Yeah, we'll talk about her in a second, because I read that as well. Okay, well, so Paul Metzler, Tammy's his younger sister, for people who don't know. His sister's going to get involved. So Paul Metzler's the quarterback, and Mr. M sits him down and says, I know you've been down since you broke your leg, so how about we do something else with you this year? And Paul will never really understand what's going on, which is what I love about him, is that Mr. M basically has to beat him over the head with, you're very popular, you're well-liked, you know, you're going places in life and you don't let people down, just like you didn't let us down in the high school championship game last year, which Paul loves. Anytime you bring up football, Paul loves. And so Mr. M's like, student council president. And Paul doesn't really get it at first. Mr. M's like, you be the president. And Paul instantly is like, oh, that's Tracy Flick's thing. I don't want to do that. He's a little scared of Tracy, as he should be, of course.
Yeah. He's almost like, it's like fear, and he's almost like saying he has a respect for destiny, like Tracy says. He's like, well, you know, Mr. McAllister, that's Tracy Flick's thing. Like, he's very much in favor of like the natural order of things. Like, that's just not my thing.
Yeah, Paul is for someone so stupid, has level-headed. But Mr. M will start dogpiling on him, saying, you know, one person running unopposed, that goes against the concept of democracy, doesn't it, Paul? You wouldn't want this to be a dictatorship like we learned in school.
Yeah, it almost reminds like that, almost as like a contrast with his teacher friend, who's like, you know, Tracy, you're one of the most attractive students I've ever had. Where he's like, that's almost like a dictatorship, like we learned about in class. Like, you just see him, he's exactly like his friend, like constantly just leveraging his position of authority to manipulate these kids just to make his job a little bit less annoying.
That's funny. That's a good point. I would love to hear from more teachers what they think of this movie. If how many of them can relate to Mr. McAllister? Like, you know what? I hate to admit it, but sometimes I fuck with kids just because it makes my day more interesting. So yeah, Mr. M, okay. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and I'm very jealous of dialogue like this in a screenplay because I wish I could write this. The apples and oranges speech. All right, let me quote this for people. So Mr. M is trying to convince Paul, the quarterback, to run for student council, and he says, Paul, what's your favorite fruit? And Paul comes out with pears, which is not the answer you're expecting to hear. So Mr. M kind of pauses for a second. He's like, okay. And he goes over to the blackboard. He's going to draw a little diagram to explain his point. And Paul changes his mind and says, no, wait, apples. So Paul is putting serious thought into what his favorite fruit is, even though that's not the lesson here.
Yeah. McAllister starts talking and he's like, no, apples.
Yeah, so Mr. M draws on the blackboard, draws all these circles, says, let's say if all you ate in your life were apples. You love apples. Every one they made you happy. Even though you got a bad one and every once in a while, they were still your favorite fruit. But then one day, he makes another circle. You got an orange. Now you can decide. And he turns to Paul. That's democracy. And my favorite thing about this scene is that Paul completely misses the point of the lesson. And what he says is, I also like bananas. And Mr. M just doesn't know what to say. He's like, exactly. Anyway, I just love that scene. Those two characters are written so perfectly.
I love how McAllister is just like, it's like what we were saying about like he's so inauthentic. He never has a real conversation with someone. Like he'll just say he'll say thing. It's like it's almost like delusional or just like laziness, where it's like he'll just say something and then he'll just like, great. Just assuming that, like, he'll assume that everything is going exactly how he thinks. He's like, all right, I see you haven't understood. This is a bad teacher. He explains something, and then someone doesn't get it, and he's like, great, and he just moves on.
Well, just the way he phrases that, like, just like we talked about in class, Paul. Like, you know Paul didn't talk about dictatorships in class, but Mr. M is like Jedi mind tricking him.
I almost feel like Paul probably paid a lot of attention in class. Or like paid attention in the class about the dictators and was like very interested, and he was like, oh my god, Stalin, that is what a crazy guy. I could see that being the one class that Paul actually like paid a lot of attention to, but he pays a lot of attention, but he just doesn't understand it, but he's like interested.
Yeah, he likes the words that are coming out of Mr. M's mouth. He doesn't really grasp the bigger picture.
Yeah,
that's a good analogy for Paul. Okay, so here we go. Here comes the conflict of the movie where Tracy, who has been running unopposed and think that is her divine right to be class president, sees the next day that Paul is putting up campaign signs. And oh boy, is she not happy about this one.
Yeah, they have the Mean Girls as later on, a couple years later, very similar, but they have like the African tribal music for the teen girl high school drama is just always effective.
I think I read the name of it. It's the same music Quentin Tarantino uses in Kill Bill Part 2. It's like a old Comanche war cry of some sort.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that sting.
Yeah, so Tracy sees Paul's poster, and again, this is where we get into the Hillary Clinton comparisons because they used this endlessly when Hillary was running for president. They loved to reference this movie. Is that she comes running over to Paul and she's like, "Who put you up to this? You just woke up this morning and suddenly decided to run for president?" And Paul just trembles. He cannot handle Tracy because she's so much like scarier than he is in a debate. And he's like, "Oh, well, I was talking to Mr. M, and he thinks maybe it would be a good idea, and how there's like all different kinds of fruit." Love that quote.
I love when she says, when he mentions it, she's just like, "So Mr. McAllister put you up to this," and he's like, and then I think she almost just immediately leaves. Like she almost knows that this guy's just a pawn, so she like goes up to him, gets the information, and then just leaves. Like she doesn't even consider him an equal or like an opponent. She's like, who are you the front man for? Once she finds out, she just leaves him.
Yeah, I think she just says, "Okay, you're on, Mr. Popular," and just walks off. She knows it's really her against Mr. M at this point. Okay, so here's the point in the movie that always gets brought up in politics. Again, a lot of people love to reference this movie, how it predicted the future of politics. And I will quote this one, and then you can give your thoughts on it, where Tracy gives a big, long voiceover right here. She's like, "You might think it would upset me that Mr. Popular is running against me, but no, it just makes me work harder." She's like, "It's no competition for me. It's like apples and oranges." So we go back to the fruit analogy. And then she says, "You see, I believe in the voters. They understand that elections are not just popularity contests. They know this country was built by people like me who work very hard and don't have everything handed to them on a silver spoon. Not like some rich kids who everyone likes because their fathers own Metzler Cement and give them trucks on their 16th birthday and throw them big parties all the time. No, they don't have to work for anything. They think they can just all of a sudden one day out of the blue waltz right in with no qualifications whatsoever and try to take away what other people have worked very, very hard for their entire lives. No, it didn't bother me at all." So, thoughts on that?
I think that is like one of the funniest stretches of dialogue in the movie. I love how she reads that last line, and she's like, "No, didn't bother me at all." Like very subtle. I think that Hillary Clinton is a very um, inspiring figure, and that she inspires a lot of opinions. But I think that whether you love her or hate her, I think that it's just you know, I think she's the kind of person that you can just really see the political culture through, and the fact that she's spent, her career's over, and it's defined by her relationships to Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump, who are three very different men, but are men who probably who probably prepared to be president less than her, maybe even collectively, and got in there much more on their abilities of charm and like personality than on their sharp political minds. Those are, with the exception perhaps of Obama, those are not men who coasted on like intellectual reputations. And I just think it's, if you want to understand how politics and gender interact, you should watch this movie. It might not be the permanent condition of like humanity, but it's how it is in American politics. And the reason that the Paul and Tracy kind of archetypes sort of manifested in Hillary and Trump now, as you think about it, but also Hillary and Obama before that. Like you had that video in your article where that comparison was made in 2008. So the fact that it's iterated again and again, I think is less about like a weird coincidence or like The Simpsons predicting the future. And also the people who made this movie knew who Hillary Clinton was. And there's 100% guarantee that she influenced the character directly. But I think it's just the inherent gender dynamic, and this movie illustrates it really well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't say they necessarily would have based her on Hillary Clinton, because remember, this is a book first, and the book is kind of based on a real life news story.
Sure, but the book and the movie are both written while Hillary Clinton is the first lady, and the most important, the biggest woman in politics, you'd have to imagine. or I'd have to imagine. So I think the fact that she looks like Hillary Clinton is not a coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. And to back up something you said, you mentioned on a video on my article. Yeah, back in 2008, when Barack Obama kind of came out of nowhere to become the Democrat nominee, there was a video, I loved it because someone pointed out how similar that was to election. And they would always play this speech. I worked very hard to get where I am, and I'm not going to have some popular guy just show up and steal what I've worked very hard for. And they always intercut that with Barack Obama laughing or getting cheered at rallies. Well, Hillary isn't really that popular. But it really was very, very a significant bit of foreshadowing because that 2008 election, the Democrat nominees in particular, that was so similar to election. And they loved pointing out that comparison in videos at the time.
I wasn't seeing things then, but after the Trump thing, like the comparison between him and I think Trump is much more of a Paul Metzler than Obama, even if you're taking away the niceness in total. But like in terms of just like the dumb airhead who's just like chatting his way there, that's Trump 101.
Yeah, with Obama it was just how popular he was. All of a sudden he was there and everyone loved him, which is the Paul thing. So it's like not so much the stupid thing, but just, oh my God, it's my turn to be president, and now this guy shows up and he's way more popular.
Yeah, she really did get Tracy flicked twice. Once by the popular guy and once by the dumb guy. Like she's getting both, every element of it.
All right, so Paul is now running for president, and Tracy is furious, and she's going to double down her efforts because now she has to work extra hard to beat this popular jock. So we're about to meet the third person in the election. Paul goes home and drives his big truck, and we see him trying to work out little campaign slogans in his head. And he's not very bright, mind him. So as he's driving home, he's thinking of rhymes for his campaign slogan, and what he comes up with is progress, promise, peanut.
I think this scene is a riot. This one's made me laugh like every time I've watched it today. I love when he's just like, Paul Power. Paul for president, just like his entire, like the only way he's able to formulate an ideology is of what words start with the same letter as his name. Like you see him say Paul Power and he kind of smiles. Like he's like, yeah, I guess I believe in that. To tie it again with political predictions, I do think it's funny that he says all these things. I don't know if he says this exact one, but the Joe Biden logo that finally won for him was Biden president. And I think he probably says Paul president. I just always expect him to say that. I think he only says Paul for president or President Paul, but he works through some very good slogans.
He's going for alliteration. He's trying to go for P words. And like you said, one he comes up with is Paul for president, which is literally just a statement of what he's going to be. So he only knows about 6 P words. Peanut, it comes up to.
He probably in that scene, like as he's talking to himself in the car, he probably in that scene forgets he's running for president and just starts saying words.
Now, do you think Chris Klein was actually acting, or they had cameras on him and he didn't know?
I don't think Chris Klein acted in this movie. I think he mounted a legitimate campaign.
You think he really thought he was running for Carver class president?
Yeah, I think he was really disappointed when they found out he lost.
He lost by 1 vote. That sucks. Oh, spoiler. Damn it. Okay, so Paul goes home to his rich house in the rich heights of town in Omaha, Nebraska. And this is where we're going to meet his younger sister, Tammy, who some would argue is the best character in this movie. Now, how would you describe Tammy to someone who has not met her before?
Tammy is what kids today would call alt. She's essentially just the ultimate sort of female Bart Simpson rebel, just doesn't want to be part of the system.
Yeah, Tammy is a rebel. Tammy doesn't fit in. She's the younger sister of the popular quarterback. She's a little overweight, kind of funny looking. She is adopted, as Paul reminds her later in the movie, even though you're my sister, but you're adopted. So she's kind of the black sheep of the Metzler family. She's going through a sexuality crisis at the moment. She doesn't really know who she is. There's a whole subplot of this movie where she's in love with a girl named Lisa, and I think when we first meet Tammy, she's making out with Lisa on her bed, and Lisa doesn't like it. She's like, I'm not a lesbian. This doesn't work for me. And Tammy's like, no, wait, I'm in love with you. And then Lisa runs out. And so now we get the flashback of Tammy's life. And I love that the very first thing she said, all we have seen is her hitting on another girl and kissing another girl. And the first thing she says to us is, it's not like I'm a lesbian or anything.
okay, I love how Tammy talks about this relationship like it's like some epic romance. We never once see them having a good time together beyond them eating asparagus and smelling pee. It's as though like they hung out once and started making out, and then Tammy fell in love. I guess the happiest we see them together is in the pictures that Tammy has. This is the look. I'm a young person. I was in high school a few years ago when you take a big picture of it. That is the most that takes me out when she has the picture of their secret lesbian romance magneted on the inside of her locker in the middle of high school. That is the single most insane thing. Actually, honestly, that might be the most insane thing anyone does in this movie. I love how she's like Mr. McAllister. She's just detached from reality. Her girlfriend comes up and she rips down the picture. She's like, "These are private. What are you doing?" She's like, Tammy says, "I don't care." And the girlfriend says, "I do." She storms off, and then Tammy says, "What did I do to make her turn away from me?"
Well, let me point out, okay, when this movie was made in 1999, posting lesbian pictures of yourself with your girlfriend in your locker for everyone to see would have been incredibly counterculture.
In 2023, that's I don't know if it's counterculture, but it's at least semi counterculture. Like that is not that tracks as a completely unhinged thing to do when you're dating someone in the closet.
Well, yeah, in Nebraska, in rural Nebraska.
And then I love right before then when she's narrating and she's like, I would always find new ways to tell Lisa that I love her, and then she drops the note and it's like, if you died right now, I would throw myself in my dad's cement truck and have myself buried in your tomb. And Lisa just looks up with this face of like, what the hell is wrong with this girl?
Yeah, Tammy is, let's just say she's finding herself. She's trying to find herself, but she's very passionate about what she loves. And she's very counterculture, and she can probably be a little difficult. And I can see why a modern audience would be drawn to her, but in 99, I guess, she would have been considered the school weirdo. That's kind of how they approach her in this.
Tammy is a walking manifestation of TikTok.
Wow, 1999 TikTok.
Yeah, she said she would do numbers on TikTok.
Okay, so Tammy is the wild card in this movie. And okay, so Tammy has a girlfriend named Lisa, and they break up, and Lisa yells some very hurtful things at Tammy. I'm not like you, I'm not a dyke, and we're not in love. So Lisa storms off. So Tammy is heartbroken, and Lisa, the girlfriend, does one of the most horrible things possible. She's going to hurt Tammy, and she will do this by yet another one of these these Alexander Payne transition scenes, which you probably are even less comfortable talking about than the last one.
No, nothing tops the last one. This one's fine.
Okay, this one's fine. So, would you like to do this one, or would you like me to?
Nah, you're good. You're the host.
So, Lisa, the girlfriend, decides to get back at Tammy by cheating on her with her older brother by starting to date Paul. Again, I cannot get over these transition. Alexander Payne just with these cheap transition shock laughs where Tammy's like, I don't know why, but Lisa decided she wanted to hurt me, and she knew exactly what to do. So we immediately cut to Chris Klein giving the O face, and there's this whimsical bassoon music, boom, 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 boom.
This movie has some great themes.
Yeah, he's like, I sure was surprised the day that Lisa Flanagan asked me for a ride home and ended up blowing me.
Yeah, I love in this movie. I compared it to Game of Thrones earlier. Like I love that there's at least 4, but you could go much higher, maybe like 5, 6, 7. Like there's so many independent actors in this movie, like different forces. You have McAllister, you have the 4 mains, of course. You have McAllister and Tracy and Paul and Tammy, and you have Lisa, who's with Paul but her own agent. You have the principal, you have the janitor, you have the other election kids. You have all these different, you have his wife and the wife of his teacher. All these people. It's great the way that they're established and set up against each other is they're all self-motivated actors coming into conflict based on those motivations. Like everyone is in it for their own reasons, and it's how they clash. It's not like just there's no one who's a pure tag along.
Just Paul. Paul, I think, is the only one.
Well, Paul's the true neutral.
He's not smart enough to have a motivation.
That's true.
Okay, so we have 3 kids in the election. We have Tracy Flick, the overachieving, insufferable girl. We have Paul, the popular quarterback, and then we have Tammy, the weird outcast, and the three people running for president. And there's a little subplot here where Tracy tries to get Tammy disqualified because she's a sophomore. And Mr. M's like, no, she can be in it. That's democracy. So Tracy is just getting infuriated that people are moving in and stepping on her toes and trying to challenge her. Okay, I'm going to skip over some stuff because we got to finish this podcast. We're running long already, but we're up to the part of the movie now where there's the affair, which I completely forgot we haven't even mentioned yet. Mr. McAllister is going to cheat on his wife with his best friend's wife.
Separated wife. Let's be fair to the morals of it all.
Yeah, the morals. That's right. The morals are important. So talk about this scene. So
McAllister goes over to Linda Novotny's house to help her with some pipe in her sink or something, and he's talking about, oh, we're great friends. We went to the mall once, talking up this relationship, and then just like everything in his life, it's all cheap and it's all BS. And then they're driving back from the mall, and he sees a motel, and he says, "Why don't we get a room?" Or he says, "Do you want to get a room?" And then she looks, and she like her face drops, and she's like, "That's not funny." And the music kind of like almost has a womp womp, and it's the one moment where his where reality sinks through, and he like gets it, but then he immediately disregards it and just continues on as though it never happened. Like the one time where reality cracks through, he just disregards it.
Yeah, I should point out right before that. So Mr. McAllister, of course, teacher of the year, Mr. Nice Guy. We see him helping his great friend Linda Novotny do chores around her house, and all he's doing is staring at her ass the whole time, which is a wonderful little detail I notice. I love just him. He won't even look at her. He just watches her butt the entire time. He's totally got he's got the hots for his buddy's ex-wife. But yeah, so he hits on her. He suggests they go get at a motel. She says no, but he's turned down. And now we get the scene that horrified my mom so much. This is a really rough scene to get through when you're sitting there with your parents, where one night Mr. M is having sex with his wife. He's trying to get her pregnant. And as he's having sex with her and she's dirty talking to him, her face is replaced with Linda Novotny, the neighbor, saying, F me hard, fill me up with your blank. And then it's replaced by Tracy Flick, the 17-year-old student, say, F me, Mr. McAllister, F me hard. So, like I said, this is where we get the hard R part of this movie.
It's really a remarkable career for Reese Witherspoon, that she's like the, you think of her as just such like a perfectly clean and proper, like she's been in some weird and like dark roles, but you think of her as like, she seems like anyone's daughter's favorite actress. Like she's just like a total sunshine image, and her first role or her first like breakthrough role is just like so raunchy.
You know what? That's funny is I thought that too. I'm like, wow, Reese Witherspoon kind of came out of the blocks in some edgy adult stuff. And I just recently saw another movie she was in called Freeway from right around this time period, early 2000s, maybe even 90s.
Is that one of like the 5 movies where she's a prostitute?
I think so, because she's really foul-mouthed. She's a little prostitute. She's like a little drug user. It's even more hardcore than Tracy Flick. So this movie actually wasn't out of character. She was doing stuff like that back then. She did some hard stuff at the start. I love her in Freeway. That's a movie I'm going to do on Staff Picks someday. She's just nasty, and you don't expect that out of sweet little Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah, Reese Witherspoon. I just pulled up the Wikipedia. Reese Witherspoon, winner of an Oscar, an Emmy, 2 Golden Globes, and is worth $440 million.
That's right. And as a 17-year-old told Mr. McAllister to F her hard.
You tell that to Mr. McAllister, that'll get him throwing his coffee at her car.
Well, she did say, Destiny, if you try to stop Destiny, it's just going to happen anyway, so might as well get out of the way. So she was kind of correct.
Yeah. You can see that final scene come to fruition in Legally Blonde 2, Red, White, and Blonde, also known as Elle Woods Goes to Washington.
Okay, so let's try to fast forward through this movie a little bit. So here we go. Like I said, the transitions, I just love the transitions, the Alexander Payne, and you mentioned earlier where something horrible happens to a character, but they say that things are going well. This is probably the best example of this scene. Mr. McAllister basically having 3-way sex with his wife, Linda Novotny, and his student, and he's got a crazed look on his face as he's banging away, and you can just see, oh, this guy's nuts. And then the voiceover is Matthew Broderick saying, so, like I was saying, things were going pretty well in my life.
Yeah, just a completely detached from reality.
This is the scene where I turned it off with my mom. I'm like, we're not going to watch any more of this movie, even though it's not actually hard R after this. That's the last moment.
Yeah, you should have skipped afterwards.
Yeah, so now we go to the assembly. Another one of my favorite scenes in the movie where the three people running for class president all give their speeches. First Tracy, and then Paul, and then Tammy. So, got any thoughts on this scene?
I love all three of them. I love how Tracy has just the total like politician speech of like I was talking to Alice from ninth grade who says this like a complete just like ChatGPT political speech. Um, I Paul, oh my God, that might be the funniest, just pure funny execution of that because it's so real. It's so real for him to just look right at this thing and just do it all in one sentence, and everyone to just explode in applause after McAllister starts it. That is so perfect. And I love Tammy, just totally like Tammy's January 6th moment, but she just completely rails against the election and rails against the whole thing. She's like, I promise that if you elect me, I'll end this, so we never have to vote again. You could just cut out the speeches and make that a short film, and it would be perfect.
Yeah, to sum up for people who have not seen it, Tracy quotes Henry David Thoreau, and she tries to give a good speech, except kids in the audience heckle her by screaming, eat me raw.
Yeah. And I actually think it's like a really good Thoreau quote when he says, "I can't make my days longer, so I strive to make them better." Like every time I watch this movie and I hear that, I'm like, it's a good point by Thoreau.
Wait, you doubt that Tracy Flick would come up with an amazing quote?
No, that's why it's so funny because it's like it's bad good almost makes sense. Like it is there are speeches that actually seem like they're written by high schoolers.
And you talked about Paul's speech, which might be, again, my favorite scene in the movie, as you just mentioned. Yeah, Paul, if people who haven't seen it, he has a speech written, and he just looks straight down and reads it off a piece of paper in one long sentence. Please vote for me. I will do a good job. I won't let you down, just like I didn't let you down in the high school football game. Like, it's just one big long sentence. He has no elocution whatsoever. And then at the end is just dead silence because no one understands what he was saying. And Mr. M, of course, as his personal cheerleader, starts applauding, and then everyone applauds because he did it. And then, like you said, Tammy says, who cares about this stupid election? She gets up there and everyone boos her at first, but she becomes very popular quickly when she says, I won't do anything. It doesn't matter who gets elected. All this matters for is the person who goes on their transcript. This is such a dumb charade. Vote for me. I'll do nothing. The only thing I'll do is I'll immediately disband the student government, and then we'll never have to go to one of these stupid elections again. To which, predictably, this would have happened in my school. She's met with a standing ovation, everyone chanting her name.
Yeah, honestly, three great speeches. I think Paul's is so funny when he's like, and you guys know that you can rely on me, like when you relied on me for that touchdown in the fourth quarter against State. So I will not let you down now either. It's so real.
Okay, so Tammy gives the speech where she basically riles the student body up into a mob by saying, if you vote for me, well, I'll disband the student government. The principals all run into their office afterwards, and I don't even know why this quote is so funny, just the way he phrases it. The principal, he's like, that little bitch made a fool out of us. Just the way he pauses before he says bitch, like he's not supposed to say that.
Yeah, that principal has such a great delivery in everything.
So they suspend Tammy. Tammy gets kicked out of school for 3 days, which she's like, great, I love it. She doesn't like going to school.
Yeah, very very Jack Smith of him.
Yeah. But there is a plot twist here where what happens when she is depressed or when she gets kicked out of school, she likes to go down, there's a power station nearby. And because she's a bit, as you said, alt or troubled, she likes to wonder what would happen if I lay down between the power lines and was instantly evaporated. So she's got a little suicidal in her as well. She's a little dark.
Yeah, this movie has like some of the most just like out of nowhere dark quotes. Like I hear you just evaporate, you turn to a gas. I wonder what that would be like. Or like when they have the earlier on when Paul breaks his leg in the intro and he just says, you know, what is my purpose? Why am I here? You hear the eagle screech in the back. Like every 15th or like 10th line is just like out of some like it's just existentialist.
Not your typical teen movie is what you're saying.
No.
Okay, let's move ahead with the plot here. So there's only a couple more really pivotal scenes in this movie. I always forget this movie actually doesn't have that many plot points. It's just a lot of lead up and character building. But we have the poster incident where Tracy is mad that Tammy is trying to sabotage her. She's mad about Paul. She's mad about a lot of stuff. And one night she's at school and she's all by herself. She's always there late at night working on the yearbook because that's what she does. She's walking through the hall and just out of the corner of her eye she notices one of her posters is falling. So she reaches up and tries to fix it. And in the process of climbing up to fix it, she falls down and accidentally rips up her own poster. And this causes a little bit of a mini tantrum. This is a fun little scene here where she has a tantrum because her poster's down.
Like that's what's great about Tracy also is like she is this like too good like character, but like she is so clearly flawed. And like she just loses her temper and just rips stuff up and then she just has to deal with it. Like I would definitely put Tracy forward as like if the movie had to have a hero, like I think she's the hero. She's the good guy. She's the one who overcomes the obstacle, which is this a-hole teacher. She screws up, she rips down, and she has to deal with that. You know, seeing her actually have like a human emotion, like she's not like a robot. She's not just like I'm a straight A student, I do everything right. Like I like that she's like fiery. Like I like that she is really pissed about things and she like takes it personal and like she's like Michael Jordan in this movie. Like everything that happens, she's just like enraged about and she takes personally.
See, to me, she's someone who's never failed at anything before, so she doesn't really know how to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because I had a girlfriend in high school who was very similar to this, just never had gotten anything but an A. But if she ever screwed up, like if she was in a basketball game and committed a foul, or she didn't get 100% on a test, or she lost an election, she was a basket case. She couldn't handle it. And I've known kids like this before. If you don't know how to fail, you really have inappropriate reactions when you do fail because you've never learned how to deal with that.
Certainly, that makes sense. Yeah, Tracy definitely is poorly adjusted, and I think it definitely has that like spoiled kid feel with like when she talks about her mom for sure, and how much attention she gets. Tracy, it's you know she is kind of this villain in the sense that like she is very flawed with like not being able to cope with anything and just being entitled, and she is insufferable, but you know from her perspective. You know, it's almost like this. Like, if you're with her, you're with her. You know, there's no way to say it. You're just like Slay Queen. You're hype for her. I love her. I love her every time I watch the movie more.
That's fine. There's no wrong opinions on this movie. It's really interesting how many different ways there are to interpret this movie. Okay, to get back to the plot. So Tracy, her poster gets torn down. She has a little tantrum, and she decides on a whim to rip up every one of Paul's posters just because he's the bane of her existence. She rips up his posters, and then she has like a moment of clarity afterwards. She's like, oh my God, what did I just do? I just shredded like 10 posters. And so because she's Miss Perfect, she can't get caught doing this. She takes all the evidence. She drives out to this dumpster out on the edge of town, and she would get away with it except for the fact that Tammy is sitting out there looking at the power lines, the alt girl, and Tammy sees Tracy disposing of the posters. So Tammy knows what Tracy did, and this is going to come to a head in a couple scenes later where Tammy is going to try to bust Tracy for it.
Yeah, I love I think, I don't know if it is, but this movie to me just functions as like, I don't know if it's intended this way, but it functions as just like the perfect kind of parody of like the other 1999 or similar era movies. And like that power station is like the perfect like Wes Bentley taking the video of the bag, or like anything in Ghost World of just like an angst prop. And I think the power line is such a great parody of that.
Okay, so let's move on a little bit here to another voiceover for Mr. M. He says, you know, the day before the election is when things really started to get complicated, which is very simplifying it quite a bit of how nasty and how bad this is going to get for Mr. M here, is the morning, okay, we're the day before the big election. Tracy has torn down the posters. Mr. M starts off by going over to his neighbor's house, Linda Novotny, and I think he's cleaning her drain, and she hugs him and thanks him for all the help. And just out of nowhere, they kind of start making out. So all of a sudden, he's getting his dream. His hot neighbor wife, his hot neighbor is into all of a sudden having an affair with him, so they make out, and it's implied, I believe, they have sex on the floor.
I think they stopped making out to talk about the hotel.
Okay, so they only have time to make out, and then they make plans. She's like, you wanted to take me to that hotel. Yeah, let's do it after school today. So Mr. M is all jazzed. All of a sudden, all his dreams are going to come true. His fantasy dream girl wants to have an affair with him.
I always think it's interesting how they cut from the hug to them like making out in the other room, so you never see the initiation at all. The way McAllister talks about it, like it's a sudden mutual spark of the affair, but the way she talks about it is that it was maybe not. But I think it's interesting, like when it's happening, like he thinks it's just this like fairy tale, and like he can never accept. Like he later is just like I love you to her, like leaving his voicemails, and like he is the most delusional character because he could never accept that like it isn't how he thought it was.
Yeah, that's the thing. He instantly falls in love with her. He thinks this is it. He's like Tammy in a way. We had one moment, oh, we're soulmates, we're destined. And she's like, no, it's not. I never realized that. He's like Tammy. He instantly falls for someone he thinks they're soulmates.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, so did Tracy with Mr. Novotny. So I guess that's kind of what everyone does in this movie.
Hey, so did Paul with Lisa.
That's true. Everyone cannot read love signals. Great commercial for the state of Nebraska.
Yeah. This is like this is a great commercial for leaving Nebraska.
I mean, I will be honest. Every Alexander Payne movie is a commercial for leaving Nebraska. There's a little tip right there. Okay, so Mr. M is about to have an affair with his neighbor, and he's so excited, and he comes to school, and he arrives at school, and there's all this drama around the election, which he could not give two craps about, but he has to deal with it because Paul's posters have been torn up, they're missing, we have Lisa accusing Tammy, and we have all this drama, and so Mr. M is tasked with finding out what happened to the posters, and he could not give a shit.
Yeah, I love how once the affair comes in, he totally loses interest in the election. Like he's just running back and forth trying to like book this motel room, etc. And he just completely loses interest in the election. I forget the exact order of this to the exact of it, but he basically forgets that he sabotaged it. I think he's just the kind of person who always needs to be doing something wrong. So like once he gets the affair, he just totally forgets about trying to sabotage this class election. But once he gets dumped, he just takes it out on there. Like he's just a man in search of something to screw up.
Yeah, Mr. McAllister's in a different movie than everybody else at a certain point, where all that matters is his affair, his soulmate, Linda Novotny. He doesn't really give a rip. And I would argue he doesn't care about these posters at all until he puts two and two together in his head and he realizes, oh my God, Tracy Flick was the only one here last night. She's the one who had to tear up the posters. So he only gets slightly interested in the election again because he has a chance to bust Tracy's ass.
Yeah. Oh, you can almost say the strength of this movie is that everyone is kind of in a different movie of the four main characters. It really is just four different movies that they're all just like coming into conflict over this race. But like even Paul's just in an American Pie movie with Lisa. From his perspective, none of this other stuff is happening. He's just having a great school year, and the worst thing that ever happens to Paul is the meeting where he gets told he didn't win the election, and I don't even think we see his reaction. The next we see him is a year later, and he's just like, "Well, I didn't win, but it's all right."
Yeah, I forgot about that. That Paul's his main storyline. If you look at this movie from Paul's point of view, I couldn't play football. I got talked into running for politics, and then I got a hot girlfriend. Like that's literally his whole storyline.
Yeah.
That's funny. I just thought about that. Wow, it would be really funny to rewrite this movie from four different perspectives and just have four different movies.
Yeah, or like a recut. If you just cut the Paul scenes, it's just like it's literally just a highlight reel.
That's amazing. That's one of the best insights I've ever heard somebody bring up on Staff Picks. But yeah, that's absolutely true. That they're all in different movies at a certain point. They just intersect around this election.
Yeah, Paul at no point in this movie faces conflict.
Okay, so Mr. M grabs Tracy or pulls her into his room and he basically tells her, I know you were here last night. I know you tore down those posters. And she gets mad and she angrily denies it. And again, Tracy just, she's like, there's a subversive element at this school. I think they did it. And Mr. M just cannot. He sees through her shit instantly. He's like, I know you were here. And he's like, Tracy, maybe one day you'll learn that being smart and doing whatever you need to get ahead, and yes, stepping on other people to get there, well, there's a whole lot more to life than that. And in the end, you're only cheating yourself. And then she's like, why are you lecturing me? And then he's like, well, not to bring it up, but there's a certain colleague of mine. And he brings up the affair. And this is a really nasty scene where he like scolds her for having an affair with a teacher and getting him fired. And she's like, well, perhaps it was his fault for getting all mushy and writing me a love letter. And maybe you and your buddies shouldn't be leching after your students, Mr. M.
Yeah, first of all, a great point by Tracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Second of all, I love the absolute slam at the end where she's like, should be leching after the students, especially when they can't even get their own wives pregnant, which is never, I'm fairly certain about this, which is never ever addressed before or after. How the hell she knows this? It's just this, I mean, you're left to just imagine it's just this unbelievable read by Tracy, but it's just like, she totally just has him neutered and he is completely speechless. I think the scene might just end.
Yeah, so the scene ends with Mr. M just being slack-jawed, but this is where he's kind of interrupted by a knock on the door. Tammy says, oh, you wanted to see me about the posters? And he's like, oh, come back later, Tammy. And Tammy looks at Tracy and says, well, because I know who did it. So Tammy has a chance to blow Tracy out of the water here and get Tracy in trouble for tearing down the posters, but that's not Tammy's motivation, is it? Tammy has a little different motivation.
Yeah, and they set it up so well with her being like primed for self-sabotage when she's talking about, and it's a great shtick too. It's just good dialogue, and it's pretty timeless. Where she talks about how silly it is for suspension to be a punishment from the perspective of a high school student whose biggest interest is leaving class and not going to school. And then she's like, and then they expel you. That seems awesome. And it's like sets up this idea that she's like wants to get expelled. So like she totally has Tracy dead to rights, but her interests, she has no interest in taking down Tracy. She has interest in using Tracy's crime, or whatever you want to call it, Tracy's offense, to take herself out. It's this incredible 5D chess move to get sent to Catholic girls' school.
Yeah, that's Tammy Metzler's whole storyline, that she could blow Tracy out of the water, but she hates school so much. She fesses up to stealing the posters. She produces the evidence. She's like, look, I tore him down last night. Mr. M knows she's lying, but he can't prove it because she's got the evidence. So Tammy gets kicked out of school. Tracy gets saved. And I love that Tracy can't let it lie. Tracy's like, you're going to pay for my posters. And Mr. M's like, chill out, Tracy. Just quit while you're ahead. So anyway, Tammy gets kicked out of school and she's out of the election. So now it's back to Tracy against Paul again.
I love that McAllister line when he's like, all right, Tracy, quit while you're ahead. Because even though he is the worst and even though he can't stand her, they honestly have they kind of have an understanding or almost a rapport where he's just like, all right, come on. It's like a classic, he knows and she knows that he knows and he knows that she knows that he knows. And he's just like, just come on, just give it a rest.
So we're back to the election. It's now Tracy Flick against Paul, just like before. Tammy's been kicked out of school. And everything's going to go horribly for Mr. M the whole rest of the movie, and he has no idea. Where he thinks after school he's going to meet Linda Novotny and have an affair with her. They've picked out the motel, which I should point out, such an Alexander Payne detail, that the name of the motel where they're going to have an affair is called the American Family Inn. Just his little commentary on Midwest families and how hypocritical they are. And so he goes there, he sets up the motel room, and then he goes back, gives his class a pop quiz, runs it's this frantic scene of him going back and forth to the motel.
I love how he gives the kids the pop quiz in order to go run off to set up the affair motel. Just out on all levels, just weaponizing his authority to just get whatever he wants, or as a means to get what he wants. Where he walks in and he's like, pop quiz, guys, if you did the reading, you wouldn't have a problem, as though this has been part of his long-term plan, but it's literally just oh, I need to go rent a hotel room, pop quiz. At no point in this movie, it's kind of, in every movie you don't really see people talk a whole lot about their jobs unless it's a movie about a job. But this is one of the all-time not one action in this movie is taken for the good of education.
Yeah, I don't know if they show this movie in classes on how to be an effective teacher.
I saw this in civics.
I read somewhere that when they were they were going around Omaha trying to find a school to shoot this movie at, and they went to this Omaha Regional High School, and they were all set to use it. This was going to be the shooting for the school, and then the principal of the school read the script, and he's like, "No, you're not filming this movie here. This does not reflect well on our school." That's a true story, by the way. Okay, so yeah, he tries to have an affair with Linda and it doesn't work, and she never shows up at the motel that night, so he's just heartsick. He's like, "But she's my new lover. We have a connection. We're soulmates." And he goes by her house, and there's a bit of funny shtick that my wife always loves this scene where Matthew Broderick's peeking around her house trying to figure out where she is, and he gets stung by a bee on his eyelid. So for the entire rest of the movie, he'll have a big puffy eyelid for no apparent reason.
I think that was part of why I didn't like the movie at first, is because the beast thing was just so unpleasant, and I was already half in, half out, and then I was like, oh no, I think it actually gave me a headache.
Want to see some cool symbolism in this movie? This is on the director's commentary that Alexander Payne pointed out that every time someone reaches for an apple or talks about an apple or grabs an apple in this movie, something bad happens to them afterwards. Adam and Eve temptation type of thing. And if you watch the scene right before he gets stung in the eyelid, he walks right by an apple tree. And Alexander Payne said that's very deliberate. But that tree, there was no apple trees in Nebraska at the time, so they actually had to tie apples to that tree to make it look like an apple tree.
It's like that's almost funny because the classic is The Godfather and the oranges.
Mm-hmm.
So they have that with the apples and the oranges. Maybe the joke of that, just thinking now, maybe the joke is that whether you have apples or oranges, you're still gonna die.
Exactly, that's the thing. Just the moral is destiny will happen regardless. Just let it happen, or you're just going to be miserable. So anyway, so Mr. M tries to have an affair with Linda. She never shows up, and then he goes home. He's like, I don't know what happened. And he goes back and he sees his wife and Linda talking. Linda has squealed on him and sold him out. And just like that, Mr. M has now been thrown out of his house for cheating on his wife.
Oh, it's such a brutal reveal when he hears the baby like slightly babbling, and then he's like, oh my god.
Yeah, so he's done. And this will not be the worst thing that happens to Mr. M. His life will spiral downwards even more in the last 15 minutes. Okay, here we go. I'm going to try to rush through this because I want to wrap this up. But right before the big day of the election, there's a funny scene where they all get down on their knees and pray, Paul, Tammy, and Tracy, about their thoughts about the election. Do you like this scene?
Yeah, I love this scene. I love Paul's where he's like, he thanks God for all his gifts. I don't remember his exact words, but he basically just like, I hope it all works out well, but I trust you, God. And I think it's just before this scene. I love the scene when Paul goes to Tammy to give her the homework from her suspension, and he just goes into this big. She's like, all right, leave me alone. And he just goes in this big babble of like, I just want you to know that no matter how this goes, I still like you as my sister. I hope it's all good kind of thing. And he just has this whole sincere kind of monologue, and Tammy just kind of gives him a look like an up and down, almost like, huh. It's like she has no response to like authenticity. She's just like, huh, all right. Like she's puzzled by him.
What could Paul and Tammy possibly talk about ever? I just wonder what that house is like.
I think if they smoked pot together, that would have been a great brother-sister relationship.
Okay, let me sum up this prayer scene that I was mentioning. So they all get down on their knees and pray. Tracy says, please God, let me win. I deserve it, blah, blah, blah. You know how Tracy's prayer is going to go. I work very hard. I deserve to be president. Please let me have this. Then we get Paul for, thank you for all the blessings in my life, my looks, my athletic ability, and what I've been told is a large penis. So, but Tammy's is the one that kills me. Because Tammy gets down on her knees and she says, well, I don't really believe in you, God, but since I've been expelled and I'm going to Catholic school, I guess I should practice. And she basically starts treating a prayer like a Christmas list. She's like, here's what I want, God. And she starts naming things. And she says, first off, make Lisa realize how much a bitch she is. I still love her. And then she says, let Paul win. And then this is a first for a prayer. She says, please, God, don't let that cunt Tracy win.
I love that line at the end because I think, from my memory, I like that she says, I still want Paul to win, not that Tracy. I love that. I don't think it's ever mentioned before or after, but I love how it's just like confirm that like Tammy just passively has hated Tracy all along, just like everyone else has?
Of course, yeah. I mean, Tammy would hate everybody, but yeah, Tracy would get under your skin like nobody. But then Tammy ends her prayer with, also, I'd like this hot pair of leather pants, and one day I'd like to be friends with Madonna. Anyway, so now we get to the last part of the movie, the last day of school, the election. Mr. M sleeps in his car. He's been kicked out of his house. And he wakes up and he's all disgruntled and disheveled because he's just over this shit. Because everything's going wrong. His wife just kicked him out of his house. He can't have an affair with Linda. And he arrives at school. And the first thing he sees is Tracy, of course, bright and chipper with her pick flick cupcakes. She and her mom have frosted 480 cupcakes for election day.
Yeah, I love how McAllister just grabs one and just wolfs it down and just keeps walking.
He goes in the shower. He's showering in the school in like the gym room, and he's just griping. He's like, I hate these kids. Miss, write me a recommendation. Give me an A. He's like, fuck them. Fuck all of them. He's just so over being a teacher.
That was killing me.
You think he just hates Tracy, but he actually hates every kid this day. He just doesn't. He's so fed up with school.
It's a textbook spiral. Like that's one of the all-time just spiral. Like the third act of this movie.
Okay, and here comes the actual election where they all vote. Just a little detail, just little stuff in this movie kills me. It's so funny where Tracy goes up to vote, where all the students line up to vote, and you say your name. Hi, I'm Frank Dworsky or whatever, and they come up and say their name, and then they get crossed off a list, and they were given a ballot. And Tracy walks up there, and it's such a neat character detail that she has to give her full name, including her middle name. She's like, Tracy Enid Flick. And the teacher's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I love that. And they don't even linger on it because they cut right away from it. She's like, I know.
Yeah, we got it, Tracy. We know who you are. Anyway, Tracy goes in the ballot box, and she's got a little flunky with a camera taking her picture for the yearbook, and she deposits her ballot. And, of course, she votes for herself because Tracy is, thinks she deserves, and she theoretically probably does deserve it, so it's a valid vote, I would say. All right, and then Paul comes in. Paul votes, and Paul will not vote for himself. He's like, he doesn't think it's right, so he votes for Tracy, and it's interesting because that will be the one vote that decides the election, which is interesting. Although, did you pay attention when they count the discarded votes later? If they would have counted the Tammy votes, Tammy would have won.
Yeah, 290.
Yeah, that's right. Tammy's speech to abolish the student government, very popular.
Yes, it's election interference, the topical movie.
Okay, so everyone does their little votes, and Paul wishes Tracy good luck, and she's like, whatever. And then we get this wonderful scene. This is the very end of the movie where these 3 kids are carrying the ballot box with the election results, and they're guarding it like it's the fucking Holy Grail. It's like they're carrying this like it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they got the Ark of the Covenant in there. Like it's so important, the results of this election.
Yeah, they have like the big wooden box, like it's the Electoral College.
Yeah. So they go in a room, and basically how it works at Carver is the students count the ballots first, and then Mr. M counts the ballots second. There's an independent count, and they have to agree. And so Mr. M is just pissy because Linda has dumped him, and he just got dumped by his wife. So he's like all short with the kids. He's like, just fucking do it, Larry. I don't care. Do your stupid count. And he storms off. And it's going to get even worse when the independent count has to happen, the second one.
Yeah, I love when he comes back, and he's like, who won? And he's like, I don't think I'm supposed to tell you, Mr. McAllister, for the independent count. And he's like, we're not electing the effing Pope. Just tell me who won.
Yeah. He just doesn't care. But then they say, well, Mr. M, it's a squeaker. 1 vote. Tracy won by 1 vote.
Oh, you see his face, and it's just like, interesting.
Yeah. Mr. M gets the idea. He's like, 1 vote, I could really alter those results.
I think it's like a Stalin quote, but it's like, it doesn't, it's about who counts the votes much more than who casts them.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah, that's exactly what happens here. So Mr. M knows that Tracy won by 1 vote, and he starts counting. And he gets the exact same count. Tracy wins by 1 vote. And you know what? He's had such a crappy day. He just is over this. This is where it kind of snaps, and I think he even says, he's like, how far will she climb in life? How many people will suffer because of her? I decided I had to stop her now.
Yeah, that's such a just like compounding delusion. And he's like, you know what? Like he turns it into like a divine mission. And he's like making it like he puts himself in the future to put himself back in time to do like the killing Hitler as a baby, like as though he's strangling dictator Flick in the cradle, and also just self-importance that like him making her lose this election is gonna prevent her from being elected president or whatever, and like he's just such an idiot. He honestly is just such an idiot.
Well, it's just they have such grand importance over this stupid election, which means nothing to anybody. Tammy was right.
Yeah.
Okay, so for people who haven't seen this in a while or haven't seen it, so what happens is he's counting the votes. Tracy's kind of peeking in because she's very impatient, and she's trying to get a hint. Did I win? Did I lose? And one of the kids in there, one of the student counters, gives her a thumbs up, and he says, you won. So she starts jumping up around out in the hall, very excited, as Tracy is wont to do. Mr. M sees her dancing around and hopping around, and that sight of her being all happy, he's like, I have to crush it. I have to crush every ounce of joy in that girl. And this is where he decides he's going to crumple up 2 ballots and throw them away so Paul will win instead.
It's an incredibly bad decision. I love like the fail to spot check nature of it, where he's undone by the fact that he forgot to empty the trash.
Yeah.
Like, he steals this election, he throws these ballots in the trash, and he can't be bothered. He doesn't even care enough about it to go take the ballots out of the trash and put them in his pocket.
Yeah, it's such an easily foilable plan. He fails instantly.
It's because he can't even commit to like his antagonism, like or doing the wrong thing. He's just like it's feckless. You know, he can't even commit to it. It's like with his affair, like he's just so caught up in the fact like this is going to happen. He never even mentions his wife or home or anything. He goes back home. Like even if the woman he was going to have an affair with didn't go and tell his wife, you know, where was he going to tell her that he had been for the past like days? Like he's just completely zeroed in on whatever idiotic thing he's decided to do, and he gets caught by the stupidest things.
I almost think subconsciously he doesn't even care about Tracy not being president. He just wants to see that one moment of her losing in front of the whole school at the election. He just wants that one moment of her being crushed publicly, and that's all he needs.
I totally.
Yeah, so what happens is he alters the ballots, and he says Paul wins, and then they have to go into the principal's office, and the principal confirms Mr. M's count. He's like, well, Mr. M's right, Paul won. And the kid, Larry Fouch, is like, no way, it doesn't make sense. When I counted those ballots, they were all there. Tracy wins by 1. And then he kind of implies, Mr. M, I gave them to you. She was winning when I gave them to you. And the principal, this is a quote I use all the time. Easy, Fouch. I don't like where you're going.
Yeah, the principal is so great.
Okay, so now we have the big assembly where they announce the winner in front of the whole school, and Tracy knows she's won, so she tells Paul, well, whatever happens, Paul, you ran a good campaign. Good luck. I'm proud to have run against you. And he's like, wow, thanks, Tracy. Because Tracy is going to be all humble. She's like, I'm going to win. And she's like, be humble, be surprised, be modest. And then right when they announce the results, she stands up. It turns out she's not correct. It's Paul. Paul wins, much to her surprise. And all of a sudden, she just has lost something for the first time in her life.
I absolutely love that. How she's the only time she's able to be humble or gracious or like fair-spirited in competition is when she thinks she knows for a fact that she's won. Like once it's locked up, then she can be like, hey, good luck.
And again, I have known so many Tracy flicks in my lifetime. I just know these kids. They have to win. They have to be the number one student in the class. They have to crush everyone. Like they'll be friends with each other with the other top students, but they're so competitive and they have to crush each other, even though they're friendly on the outside. I've known these kids.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I noticed at the end of the movie, I caught, when she said she graduates, I think, in the top 7th percentile of her class. How is it possible that 6% of the kids beat her in grades?
That's a good point. Well, who says the top 7th percentile?
I will tell you exactly the type of person who says that. The person who finishes exactly 7th percentile and knows their score and has to announce it to everybody. I just know. I know kids like this. I know people who 30 years later still remember their exact class rank. It was that important to them.
My class rank was was one higher than you had to be in the top 50%. which I just know because it's basic division that you can do when you're in the top half of your class.
I was exactly on the 10% cutoff. We had 220 in my class, and I was number 22, which is astounding considering I put in no effort in school. So it doesn't really speak well to my classmates.
I feel you.
Well, by the way, I was just pointing out I make fun of people who remember their class rank, and then you and I just remembered our class rank.
That's very true. It's very, very election of us.
Yes, I'm hypocritical just like Mr. McAllister. Okay, so Paul wins the election. He's like a big sheepdog. Oh my God. Oh gosh. Thank you guys. This is so cool. We cut to Tracy at home, just ugly crying, just snot running down out of her mouth and nose. Her mom comes in and mom helpfully says, maybe you could have made more posters. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. If she said maybe you could have made more posters, or if you would listen to my advice on the script. Oh, but I don't know.
And then I swear she gives Tracy a Valium or something. She gives her a pill and says go to sleep. Like she gives her an adult sleeping pill.
That mother is a real piece of work in 2 scenes.
Yeah, so Mr. M has sabotaged the election. He's given it to Paul. And now he goes back home and tries to make up with his wife. She slams the door in his face. He basically has to spend the night in the motel. I love this little moment in the movie where he's been kicked out of his house. His whole life is spiraling out of control. He goes to the motel where he was going to have the affair with Linda, and he checks in. And the front desk clerk just helpfully says, "You want the same room?"
I love that line, yeah. I love with the wife, when he shows up back at the door, it's like this subtle kind of thing where like she closes the door in his face, but like she like pauses for like a couple of seconds, like gets a few words out before she closes the door, but like once she hears enough to know that he's just gonna start, like he just starts sputtering, and you know that he's just gonna start saying some crap about like whatever, and she just closes the door like almost like with a sigh, not even a slam. She's just like, I can't even listen to you anymore.
Yeah, she's over him just like he's over the kids in school.
Yeah, and it's great with that character because he really never ever says anything. Like you don't even know what he would apologize for because he's just in a constant state of fakeness that I don't even know what an authentic apology would be for him. Like I like you could honestly almost certainly go through this movie and make the case that he's a legitimate sociopath, but like I don't even know, like it's almost like what would he apologize for? Like I apologize that you've seen my behavior. You know, like there's no authenticity for him to even. I don't think that character is capable of guilt.
Well, I love the next morning. His wife has kicked him out of the house. She's going to start divorce proceedings. He gets kicked out of the house, and the next morning he has a new lease on life. He's like, you know what? I'm going to start. This is an opportunity. Diane and I we'll just talk about this, and we'll talk about our problems. He has no idea his life is over.
This is going to be something for us to work through.
Okay, so the finale of the movie is the last day. Mr. M has been kicked out. He's sleeping in a hotel. He wakes up and there's a sunrise. He's like, you know what? This is a new day. He's like, I'm going to make the most of it. And he's like, I'm going to get my life back on track. And he's like, the election was behind me by now. The worst was over. After all, what harm had really been done? No one was dead. And he's going to go to school. And this is where the shit hits the fan when everyone in his meeting in the principal's office, they found his ballots that he crumpled up from Tracy that he left in the trash. And they're all waiting for him in the principal's office to confront him.
I love one detail in this where you can actually hear his name on the intercom as he's walking in the hall. Then it gets in and then the secretary is actually like, Bruce or whoever first name the principal wants to see you, and he's like, oh, okay. He's so Bambi-eyed going in there. Like he's a complete like, oh, can't wait. I wonder what this is about. And then he goes in, and then it's just that's the shot of the movie is everyone staring at him with the 2 ballots, and he's just his face. It's almost it's not a Dutch angle, but it's like it's the weirdest perspective ever. But his face is he's just gawking, and he's like, it's like the longest you could ever hold.
Not only is he gawking and doing the but he still has the swollen eyelid from the bee sting.
Yeah, and the bee sting does a weird thing where you can really see under it. There, it's just like this total Hunchback of Notre Dame situation.
And I love the callback here. The very first thing in this movie we see is Mr. M carelessly throwing a piece of garbage out of the refrigerator. It misses the trash can, lands on the floor. The janitor walks by and says, "Seriously, you're not going to pick that up?" So the janitor hates Mr. McAllister for just not caring about his job. And that's what eventually does Mr. McAllister in. We see at the end here the janitor's there, and they cut to a close-up of the trash can, they cut to a close-up of the ballots, and they cut to a close-up of the janitor looking at him angrily. So the very first scene in the movie has a payoff that the janitor is the one who sold him out for being careless.
That's politics. You always forget about the working man. That's why you always campaign in Wisconsin.
Yes. So Mr. McAllister is busted. The principal says, "Hope you can clear something up for us, Jim." So he gets busted. He quietly offers his resignation. And just like that, after 11 years or whatever, his career at Carver High is over.
Yeah, a horrible day for the Carver pep rally planning squad. They had to recast the cowboy. Do you think a month later, one person at school was sad or remembered Mr. McAllister?
I mean, they would have remembered it for being a funny story. Yeah, but not him.
But when he's like I guess you're right. They do know who he is. I forgot that it immediately is not private. But he's like, I was the kind of student and teacher that made a difference. I bet you he leaves and everyone's like, oh, McAllister's gone. Then everyone forgets and moves on.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be a realist, but there are very few teachers that make a difference. Most students just move on and forget school, to be honest. Yeah, so that's it. He's kicked out of school. He offers his resignation over this stupid election. So now he's lost his wife, his house, his marriage, his career, his status in the community, because now he's a laughing stock because he conspired to ruin an election for children. And I think it ends with him pulling up at a stoplight next to Fauch, the kid who counted the votes, and Mr. M nods at him and Fauch spits at him, which is his last moment in Omaha.
Yeah, that's the moment we need to leave Nebraska.
Easy, Fauch. I don't like where that spit's going. And so this is where we just wrap up the story that Paul's life changes not at all. He just continues to party, has a good senior year, gets into college, University of Nebraska, and is in a frat. So his life changes not at all. Although he is dumped by Lisa. Lisa, the big winner here, she's upgraded to the next quarterback. And then Tammy, her outcome after this movie is she is at Catholic school. She was expelled. Her parents made her go to Catholic school. She loves it there because the kids get away with murder and they smoke pot in the bathroom, and she meets a new girlfriend named Jennifer. So she's very happy. It
is really funny that in this movie all of the kids win. It honestly really is. It's extremely Ferris Bueller. All the kids just are in a complete up, and McAllister's just beat down.
And then what happens to Tracy? Let's see. She has a productive year as student president. She graduates in the top 7th percentile, which I thought when I first saw this movie was national. But no, it's just top 7th percentile in her school, which, that's good. But I'd be a little disappointed in Tracy Flick if I was her mother, to be honest.
Yeah, a little maybe drop a club.
Yeah. But she does get into Georgetown with a bunch of scholarships. And then she says her only regret is that she still loves Dave Novotny, her teacher. She misses their talks. And she wonders what happened to him. Did he ever finish his novel?
Oh my God, the cutaway with the price gun just totally takes me out. That is the funniest thing. It's just boom, 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 and nothing. And you know that in his mind, I've worked at grocery stores in my life. When you're working at those kind of jobs, it's purely mental because you just have to go somewhere else in your mind because you can't be thinking about the task at hand. So you're thinking about movies or listening to a podcast, such as staff picks. But you know in that scene that Navalny's mind is empty. He's not thinking about his novel when he's pricing those cans of aerosol. Okay, little fun fact here. So in the movie, Mr. Novotny, after having an affair with Tracy, gets kicked out of school. His wife dumps him. He moves back home with his parents in Milwaukee, I think. I forget if that's right, Milwaukee. And now he works in a hardware store putting price tags on paint, which is a wonderful visual, and it's like one of those transition jokes that Alexander Payne does so well. But little fun fact about the scene. If you pay attention to that scene, if you know the movie Citizen Ruth, that whole scene is a flashback to Citizen Ruth. He has a button that says "Ask Me," which is worn by a character in Citizen Ruth. Also a character in About Schmidt, if you know that movie. That button makes an appearance in all 3 movies. And the cans of paint that he's putting the price tag on are the exact same cans of paint from Citizen Ruth that Ruth loves to huff and get high off.
So it's a fun little callback to Citizen Ruth. Yeah, so Tracy moves on to college. She has a miserable time there because nobody really understands her. They don't like her in college. No one signs her yearbook. There's a little thing of other kids making fun of her, and she says, I've come to accept that only a few people are meant to be truly special. We're solo flyers. And then she quotes the teacher who she's still in love with, Mr. Novotny. It's like Dave said, if you're going to be great, you've got to be lonely.
Two things on that. Tracy, similar to the Matthew Broderick Ferris Bueller connection, I think there's a really interesting Legally Blonde connections with this character, because it is an interesting kind of contrast where Elle Woods is basically like the Tracy Flick. It's basically Tracy Flick intelligence with like Paul Metzler social. Like she's almost the merger of those two characters. So it's interesting to think about. And also, it's a little Nixonian who I've been reading about this year, but when she says that thing about like, to be great, I just have to be a loner and like the whole thing at college, it is like over the top, but it also might be true. Like when you read about people who are like achieve exceptional things, it's rarely with a robust social life. So it's this interesting, like, I like how real it is, and that makes it timeless, where like Tracy's saying all this stuff and it's played for laughs about like how if she's going to do great things, like she has to be a loner and all that stuff. But like, it's not ridiculous. And like, here's what I think about Tracy is, and maybe this is one thing that kind of could make your opinion hinge. This is one thing your opinion could hinge on it. But like, I think Tracy Flick is like, in universe, like legitimately a legitimately talented and like exceptional person. So like her wanting to do great things, like I think she's capable of great things. So like, I don't like, it's different than like a character, I can't think of one, but like a character who's like self-important, but like completely unqualified. Like Tracy Flick acts like she's the most qualified person, but all the evidence suggests that she is.
I was just going to say, I've been in gifted programs my whole life, so I've been around gifted kids. I just know them. Gifted kids traditionally don't have a lot of friends because they don't fit in real well. So I understand that. I agree with you that Tracy probably is very talented and very gifted, and a lot of those kids have no way to relate to the rest of the world. So I kind of empathize with her a little bit because I've known a lot of kids like that. Although I should point out, you are correct. This quote is fantastic. To be great, you've got to be lonely. And that's a Nixonian thing, like you said. There's a lot of truth to that quote. But I cannot resist pointing out this is an Alexander Payne movie, and that she only got that advice from the pedophile who was grooming her. So she pulls out a wonderfully profound quote that's very true, but it only came to her because the guy was trying to groom her for sex when she was underage. So I have to point out that's such an Alexander Payne detail.
Yeah, more Dennis Hastert than Richard Nixon.
Anyway, so that's everyone's life story after the movie. They all move on. They succeed in their own way. And the only one who fails spectacularly is Mr. McAllister, Matthew Broderick, who loses everything, loses his wife and his house. She takes everything but the car. He ends up in New York City, where I guess he considers this kind of a promotion, but it's not really, where he's basically a part-time museum guide for the Museum of Natural History.
Yeah, it's prestigious.
I like that he points out, I seeked refuge in New York like all the immigrants at Ellis Island. Yes, that's exactly what it was like.
I love how also when he's narrating, he acts like the audience is on his side, like throughout the entire movie, and because the way he says like, "That's right, I'm teaching again."
That's right, high five, guys, I did it. We did it.
You almost have this thing where you can tell the narrators in movies who are recording it all at once and have not gotten any feedback on it, because he's saying all this stuff and it's like, you do not know how you sound. This is not cross-examined narration.
Again, I cannot just keep repeating the fact this is such an Alexander Payne character, the person who thinks they're the hero of the story, but they're not. So he meets a woman in New York named Jill, and things are looking up and we're taking it slow, and he's like, you might wonder if I ever saw Tracy Flick again in my life. Well, yes, I did. And my wife would say this is her favorite scene in the movie, the final confrontation between Mr. M and Tracy.
McAllister's in Washington, D.C., seeing the sights. He sees Tracy Flick walking out with this congressman that she's interning for, and he is just so incensed, and he just goes on this narration monologue about what's she doing in that car. He starts feeling superior over her, saying like, "Ah, she's so miserable. I'm doing so much better. You know, what's she doing in that car?" And then it just accumulates it, probably the thesis of the movie. You know, who the F does she think she is? And then he runs up and throws the coffee at her, and the car immediately stops, and then he just runs away.
The final visual of the movie, Mr. M sees Tracy one last time. I wrote it down because I just love the dialogue once again. He's like, I saw her there. I saw her getting in that limo, and all the bad memories came flooding back. All the things I wanted to say to her, it all came flooding back. And I suddenly realized I wasn't angry at her anymore. I just felt sorry for her, thinking about my new life and all the exciting things that I'm done. Meanwhile, she hasn't changed. She's still pursuing her stupid life dreams. It just makes me sad. He's like, he starts feeling superior, then he immediately switches on a dime. I mean, where is she really trying to get to anyway? What is she doing in that limo? Who the fuck does she think she is? And he throws, I think it's a milkshake, not coffee. But yeah, he just flings it at her limo. It hits the thing. They're like, hey, who are you, asshole? And they come out of the limo and he just runs away. And that's his last moment of glory.
Yeah. The ultimate McAllister moment, because he just does this thing without thinking, just does this impulsive action and then is immediately like chastised for it and just runs.
Now, I should point out a little fun fact. The ending is different in the book, and I read the ending was different in the movie originally. That in the book, Mr. M and Tracy make up and reconcile, and she meets him. He's working at like a tire store, and they make amends, and he signs her yearbook, and he wishes her good luck. So the book is much happier, and they originally filmed that in the movie, but the test audience didn't like it. So they had to add this ending where Mr. M throws the milkshake at her. So that was kind of a reshoot.
I don't like it either. I don't think Tracy has any reason to forgive this guy. I think it's funnier if he's just totally written him off as like this weird ass teacher that I had once who like sabotaged my election, and then I might have seen it Washington D.C. once. Like, I like the idea that these people have no relationship outside of like to each other. They should be like, why did this person affect me?
No, yeah, I agree with you 100%. That ending does not ring true. This movie is so cynical, and it's all about garbage and people treating each other horribly. It doesn't work if there's a nice happy ending. I'm really glad they changed that.
And don't forget the ending after the coffee throw or the milkshake throw, when he's saying, so what's the difference, morals and ethics? What's the difference between an Ignatius and a sedimentary rock anyway? And this girl raises her hand, this blonde girl with really well casted, like innocent kind of face, and he's just like, anyone?
Yes. It all comes full circle. He's right back to where he started. He's got the one smart kiss-ass girl in the class that's trying to answer his questions, and he won't call on her. So nothing has changed whatsoever for anybody in this movie.
And I love how he says the whole like rock thing. Like, he has the exact same tenor as the morals and ethics or the branches of government. It almost proves that like the fact, it's not like he like really cares about civics, and he's like, Tracy Flick doesn't actually respect civics. Like, it's not about the knowledge, it's not about the teaching or like the subject matter. It's literally just about the power.
Oh yeah, and that's what it's always been for him, really. Okay, so that's the end of the movie. A couple fun facts I want to point out. Again, this has been maybe my longest podcast ever. I don't know how much I'm going to cut it down, but I do want to throw in a couple things at the end. So that ending I talked about, that was where they reconcile Tracy and Mr. M, and he signed her yearbook, and it's all happy. What's interesting is that ending was filmed, and there was no proof of it. Nobody knew it existed until it apparently turned up on a VHS tape someone found at a yard sale in 2011. And so, like, all of a sudden they're like, wow, look at this extra ending for Election that nobody had any proof of existing. So that's actually a relatively recent development. I mean, 12 years after the movie came out, they discovered this alternate ending. So that's kind of a fun little trivia fact. Yeah, also the actress who played Tammy, you mentioned her earlier. We kind of glossed over her because I was trying to keep moving, but her name was Jessica Campbell. And again, a lot of people who watch this movie now say, oh, she was the standout. She was really good. Jessica Campbell, kind of a sad story. She was acting, just didn't have a long career. She eventually retired, and she became a doctor of like alternative or holistic medicine in Oregon, if I recall. And one day God, a couple years ago, was it during COVID or right before COVID? I forget, 2019 or 2020. She was found dead. She died young. And if I recall, to this day, they still have never announced why she died or what the autopsy was. So it's kind of a mystery how she died. Just kind of natural causes in her 30s, maybe.
It says she was sick on the day of, but that says Wikipedia is the same. Wikipedia is the same thing. 38, died in December 29th, 2020, so about 3 years ago. She retired in 2002, so 2 years after making this movie, she made 4 movies ever. She was in Election, first movie, then 3 other feature movies. One was direct-to-video. She was in a TV movie, and she was in 2 episodes of Freaks and Geeks, which I actually remember her in those 2 episodes. She was Seth Rogen's saxophone-playing girlfriend, and that it's not the richest character ever put to screen, but I'd say it's a pretty nice compliment to this movie because it's pretty decently similar tone.
And then the last thing I wanted to mention once again was I cannot emphasize this enough, not just for you, Owen, but for anybody. Find the DVD of Election and track down the director's commentary. If you want to hear a director who's really smart and really good at what he does, just explain his process, and you will learn so much more about how to write a movie, how to structure a movie, and how to use symbolism. The director's commentary for Election, where he talks about circles and garbage. And my wife wanted to remind me, she says, there's a whole subplot about fecundity, which is a word that means fertility, meaning abundant offspring. There's a whole subplot about fecundity and spreading your seed and seed bearing. If you look through this movie, there's a lot about that as well. There's so many things going on in this movie that are kind of artsy-fartsy, but Alexander Payne gets away with it because he's so clever and he tells a very well-told story at the same time. So I just want to plug that DVD commentary one more time.
I'll definitely listen to that. Yeah, I have that Election DVD, easy to throw in.
Yeah, and with that, I think we have... the raw audio on this, I should point out to people, is 2 hours 52 minutes. I have never had an episode over 2 hours 10 minutes, so I have no idea how the final cut of this is going to go down. But did you have fun on your first time here, Owen? Did you enjoy that?
Oh, it was a blast. I hope it was 2 hours and 50 minutes of good stuff.
And with that, I think we're done. Anything else you want to say about Election or anything floating around in your head before we sign off?
I would say that I'd like to know who, between the two of us, who we'd vote for in this election, because I think I would certainly vote for the blacked out Tammy Square if I was in high school during this election.
I mean, I'm a comedy writer, so the one who says I'm going to disband government and we never have to do this, and the principal hates that person, I would instantly vote for them because it's funny.
Well, you've got a good presidential election to look forward to.
I was going to say, with the asterisk being that's also how Trump got elected, by that same mentality.
Yeah.
So don't listen to my political advice for anything, but yeah, I would have voted for Tammy.
Yeah, in election 2, Tammy continues to run while under expulsion.
Yes, she's in jail. She's been jailed.
Tammy Metzler facing 4 counts of expulsion in 4 different jurisdictions, running for class president.
I would not put it above Tammy to be indicted for treason, to be honest. And again, for my audience, this is Mario Lanza. This is Staff Picks. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at staffpickspodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter @MarioJLanza. And until next time, I'll be out there searching for more movies that deserve more love, and I'll try to find somebody interesting to come on and talk about them. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Who cares about this stupid election? We all know it doesn't matter who gets elected president of Carver. Do you really think it's going to change anything around here? Make one single person smarter, or happier, or nicer? The only person it does matter to is the one who gets elected. The same pathetic charade happens every year. And everyone makes the same pathetic promises just so they can put it on their transcripts to get into college. So vote for me, because I don't even want to go to college, and I don't care. And as president, I won't do anything. The only promise I will make is that if elected, I will immediately dismantle the student government so that none of us will ever have to sit through one of these stupid assemblies again. Or don't vote for me. Who cares? Don't vote at all.
Do you want an apple or do you want an orange? That's democracy.
I also like bananas.